What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. Pirate. My Strange Ability 1 Saw Chapter 1 Hyun Calendar Year 1503. Advertisement PS. If you don't want to read the background of the story, you can skip the first 3 chapters. Hyun Calendar Year 1503. At this time, there are still 17 years before Luffy goes to sea. The piercing gunshots mixed with the panic of the villagers broke the original tranquility, and the sky-high firelight illuminated the dark village like daylight. A hideous-looking corpse fell in a pool of blood, with either despair, fear, or anger on his face. Broken limbs and broken arms were scattered around, and the scene in front of him was like purgatory on earth. In a dilapidated house, the young man clenched his fists tightly, because he was too hard, his nails had pierced into his flesh and blood. He was not aware of the heartbreaking pain that came from his palms. Compared with the pain in his hands, the scene of purgatory in front of him hurt him more. Let me go. All the valuable things have been handed over to you. An old figure knelt in front of a ferocious-looking man, kowtowing and pleading. The man was thin, with high cheekbones and sunken eye sockets. He held a cold long knife in his hand and sneered at the old man who was kneeling and kowtowing. HMPH, who do you think I am? Lousy as a pirate. The man with a stern face snorted coldly and took out the long knife in his hand. Without any hesitation, a head flew up and the cry stopped abruptly. He raised the long knife to his eyes, sniffed it, and showed a satisfied look on his face. The age of great pirates was indeed a good era. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed and slowly fell on a wardrobe nearby. The corners of his mouth were raised slightly, revealing a cold smile. Tisk tisk tisk, there is another one. The young man stared closely at the figure that was getting closer and closer to him, his eyes full of anger, and his clenched fists showed that he was ready to fight. Suddenly, there was the sound of panicked footsteps, and a rough voice shouted. Scott, stop playing around and prepare to retreat, Marine is here. Scott stopped expressionlessly and replied calmly, I know. As he spoke, he suddenly raised his long sword and slashed casually. A sharp sword light struck the cabinet in front of him fiercely. The wooden cabinet exploded instantly and scattered all over the floor. Advertisement? No. Is the perception wrong? Scott stared at the scene in front of him, shook his head thoughtfully, grabbed the scattered baggage, and turned around to leave. After a long time, a thin hand slowly stretched out from the ruins, followed by an arm and a person. This is a thin young man with blonde hair and a delicate face, with a hint of youthfulness on his face. But his eyes lost the vigor and vitality of a young man, and were replaced by endless hatred and sadness. He is not from this world, or half of his memories do not belong to this world. He was originally an ordinary employee in Dongyang City. Due to an out-of-control dump truck, he was lucky enough to become one of the time travelers. This was the second day after he came to this world. He had just figured out what kind of world he had traveled to and determined his goal, to become a great pirate. Different from the gentle side of anime representation. Real pirates have no humanity, cruelty, evil, and madness are synonymous with them. They are the scum of the sea and the cancer of the world. He looked solemnly at the old man lying in a pool of blood. This old man was his grandfather in this world. Although they had only known each other for 2 days, there was no doubt that the old man was a gentle man. When the pirates came, he hid in the underground cave under the wardrobe. Although the cave is large enough to accommodate 2 people, he knows that while people can hide, the breath of life cannot be concealed. In order to avoid being searched, he chose to stay. Even though the probability of being searched was slim, he even sorted out the treasure. However, the pirates did not let him go. The sound of burning flames echoed in his ears. The young man held the old man in a pool of blood in his arms and walked out in a daze with his head in hand. Sreeli Town, a peaceful town in the past, has become a purgatory on Earth tonight. The demonic pirates have left. They are raging like locusts, taking away everything that can be taken away, including treasures, food, and even children and women. There are slaves in this world, so women and a child is an asset in itself. Streams of human blood formed, impacting the boy's visual nerves, burning, wailing, and crying everywhere. The smell of blood and kerosene mixed together, forming an indescribable pungent smell. The young man stared at it all like a walking corpse. The impact of the scene in front of him was too great. He staggered and finally couldn't bear it anymore. He collapsed to the ground and felt a nausea. Vomit. The vomiting could no longer stop, and he felt as if his stomach was a bottomless pit, constantly wanting to vomit out everything, even his internal organs. It seemed that God couldn't bear to see this tragic scene. The sky began to become gloomy and depressing, and heavy rain poured down amidst lightning and thunder. The surrounding fire gradually extinguished. The rain could extinguish the burning flames, but it could not extinguish the raging anger in the young man's heart. Advertisement. He stopped vomiting and raised his head with difficulty, his thoughts flooding in his mind. This is the world of One Piece. A world full of endless possibilities. Wuha 8 Gates Combat Power System, Swordsmanship, Marksmanship, 6 Styles. Various races, including the Dantata clan, the Giant clan, the Fisherman clan, the Fur clan, the Longhand clan. There are also magical devil fruits, Logia, animal type, Paramecia. Race is innate. Unfortunately, he is just an ordinary human race. Devil fruits are hard to come by, either by luck or wealth. There seems to be only one path in front of him, which is to practice physical skills and swordsmanship. As a child of an ordinary family, there is no doubt that joining Marine will be his only choice. Ding! It is detected that the host has a strong desire, and the reputation system is unlocked. When the reputation reaches the standard, a lottery will be held. Current progress 0-100s. System. He was greatly shocked by the welfare of the time travelers, and quickly checked it out. Unlike other 8-gate systems, the reputation system is very simple, with no novice benefits and no various stores where you can purchase it. Some are just simple progress bars of 0-100s, and other than that there is no response no matter how much you shout. Since this is the first time for host to activate, it needs to consume mental energy to activate. Please prepare host. 10. 9. Wait, I'm not ready yet. He replied anxiously, the place is now devastated. What if the pirates kill a pirate during the activation process? 8. The reputation system continues to count down regardless of the host it wants to stop. The young man stood up with difficulty and looked around, trying to find a relatively safe place, but before he could take a closer look, he felt dizzy. 1. The countdown is over. As the world was spinning, he felt that his soul was being pulled away, his eyes darkened and he fainted. Chapter 2 For World Peace Advertisement. The pouring rain continued to fall, and the wind became more and more fierce like a crazy buffalo. A group of people in dark coats were patrolling quickly. The scene in front of them was terrible, but when everything was taken for granted, it would be nothing. The pirates have left. These beasts are simply not human. Go and find out if there are any survivors. We found it, leader. There is still a child alive, but he fell into a coma. A man with a serious face, black hair hanging casually like a waterfall on the back of his head, and no eyebrows nodded. Well, good, wait until he wakes up and ask him which pirate did it. Meng Chi Di Drag pressed his temples and sighed heavily. It was not that he had never seen the tragic scenes of massacre of villages, but his heart could not be calm every time. Chief, this is his information. The soldier on the side stepped forward and handed a document to Dolog. Name. Kukulo Karen. Age, 17 years old. Address, Sriri Town. Ah! Karen opened his eyes suddenly like an electric shock, screamed in terror, gasped for air, and his whole body was soaked with sweat like a flood. He dreamed of the scene that had just happened. In the dream, he was ruthlessly dismembered by the pirate named Scott. The huge fear woke him up from the nightmare. Following Karen's exclamation, the soldier patrolling at the gate also spotted him. He pushed the gate of opening, poured a glass of water for Karen, and said with a gentle smile, "You wake up, drink some water first." Saying that, regardless of Karen's reaction, he turned around and walked out the door. After a while, Karen saw a man with a serious face and no eyebrows walking over. The Sweating King, Dorag. The first time she saw him, Karen recognized him. Monkey D. Dorag, a man named the most evil criminal in the world, by the world government. Dorag leads the Revolutionary Army in an attempt to overthrow the world government composed of more than 170 participating countries. He is a revolutionist in this world. How are you? Dorag looked at the young man in front of him and asked. He had a strange feeling, as if the young man in front of him seemed to know him. I'm fine. Karen drank water to hide her inner nervousness. Where am I now? How is the town? Have you caught any pirates? Advertisement. After asking several questions in a row, Dorag was very patient. He walked to the bed, squatted down and looked straight at Karen. You're in a makeshift tent and the town has been completely destroyed. Dorag let out a breath, a little afraid to look at the young man's hopeful eyes. As for the pirates, I'm sorry, kid, they had already left when we came. The blame and disappointment he imagined did not come. What he saw was the boy's dull eyes. Karen was not surprised by this result, he murmured. As expected, that's good, it gave me a chance to take revenge in person. Where is my grandfather? Where is he now? Because there were so many corpses, and they were all with broken limbs and arms, it was impossible to tell them apart, so we collected all the corpses together and cremated them. Now they are all in a cemetery. Dorag looked at Karen apologetically. Okay, I understand. Karen sat on the bed, her eyes terrifyingly calm. You are Marines, right? I want to join Marine. Of course Karen knew they were not Marines, but he couldn't join the Revolutionary Army now. For revenge? Just when he was about to nod, he seemed to think of something, and Karen said solemnly. For world peace. World peace, such a simple word. Dorag took a deep look at Karen and stood up slowly. Does it have to be Marine? Karen understood why Dorag asked him this. According to the plot, 1503 in the Hainan calendar was the year Luffy was born. It was also 3 years after Dolog established the Revolutionary Army. Joining the Revolutionary Army is also a good choice, but Karen will not do so, mainly because the Revolutionary Army is hiding in Tibet, which is not conducive to his growth. He has not forgotten that he also has a reputation system, and hiding is not suitable for him. In fact, pirates should be the most suitable profession for increasing reputation. Once a bounty order is posted, reputation will naturally increase. But now he doesn't want to become a pirate. It's not because his enemy is a pirate, but because he doesn't have the strength to become a pirate now. Becoming a pirate without the strength is definitely the stupidest choice. In contrast, although Marine is not free, it can ensure Karen's early growth. Advertisement: if you do well in Marine, you can come into contact with the powerful Marine 6 styles, and even hockey. What do you mean? Aren't you Marine? Karen asked with a confused look on her face. We are a revolutionary army, an organization established to overthrow the world government. Dorag looked at Karen firmly. He had a good impression of this little guy who kept saying he wanted world peace. Will you eliminate the pirates? Dorag was silent. The Revolutionary Army occasionally assisted the reconstruction of islands that had been invaded by pirates, but it was not the responsibility of the Revolutionary Army to eliminate pirates. Their first task was to fight against the world government. Karen also knew that the Revolutionary Army would not go out of its way to eliminate pirates. He was not worried that the Revolutionary Army would force him to join, he just needed a suitable reason for rejection. Won't? Then I'm sorry, I can't join you right now. As expected by Karen, Dolog didn't say much and just nodded slightly. Okay, I'm a little sorry, but if you are disappointed with Marine's performance in the future, you are welcome to come to me at any time. Okay, it's settled. Karen sat up from the bed. In fact, he did not suffer any real damage. It was just the mental shock that was too great, coupled with the severe vomiting and the first binding of the system, which made him look so weak. Do you know Scott? Karen will not forget the name of this demon. He needs information, at least to know which pirate group he belongs to. Scott? The Blade Pirates? The soldier standing aside glanced at Karen and added. Scott is the first mate of the Blade Pirates. The Blade Pirates are a vicious pirate group composed of swordsmen. The captain is a big pirate with a bounty of 45 million, and Scott himself also has a bounty of 32 million. Bounty. What is the concept of 32 million? You must know that even if Straw Hat Luffy went to sea and defeated the fisherman Aaron, the bounty he received was only 30 million. And just Aaron can even control a small town for more than 10 years in the plot. Further up there is a captain worth 45 million, which is really difficult. If there were no accidents, an ordinary person might not be able to defeat him even if he spent his whole life. But Karen is different. He still has a system. Although he doesn't know what 1000 reputation will give him, the system's things are not too bad no matter how you think about it. Dorag left, his departure as swift as his arrival. As a revolutionary soldier, he could not stay on a small island for too long, let alone an island massacred by pirates. Once discovered, the world government would be happy to pin the blame for the massacre on the island on the Revolutionary Army. For the world government, the Revolutionary Army is much more dangerous than the pirates. He did not force Karen, but left some food, a boat, and a letter to Karen. Chapter 3 Recruit Training Camp Advertisement. After Dorag left Sreely Town, Karen did not stay here for too long. He simply paid homage to his grandfather before planning to leave. Sreely Town is located in the East China Sea. The East China Sea is the sea where Luffy was born and where the Straw Hats were founded and set sail. It is also the weakest sea area among the 4 seas, but that is the future, and the current East China Sea is still quite dangerous. Because Luffy was just born, Marine hero Garp hasn't returned to his hometown that frequently. The Marine branch closest to Sreely Town is the 198 branch. They only found out that Sreely Town was massacred the next day. They arrived just as Karen was getting ready to leave. Did the Blade Pirates do it? The leader, Marine, took a small notebook and started recording. Yes. How do you know? Marine stared at Karen and asked. He felt that the boy in front of him was not a normal person. No boy could be so calm after such a tragedy. He said it himself, his name is Scott, and Scott is the first mate of the Blade Pirates. Oh my god, it's really the Blade Pirates, a big pirate with a bounty of up to 45 million. The soldier next to him exclaimed and looked warily at the distant sea. His legs were shaking a little, as if he was very worried about the Blade Pirates leaving and returning. The Marine officer who was recording was also wary. The 45 million pirate group was not something a Marine of his level could fight against. You can come back to the Marine branch with us first. Karen didn't speak. He took out Dorag and left him a letter. This was what Dorag told him and he could show it when he met a Marine officer. Although he didn't know what the content of the letter was, he believed that Dorag would not harm him. What's this? The officer looked at Karen in surprise, then reached out to take the letter and read it. Are you a relative of Lieutenant General Garp? The officer looked at Karen in disbelief, his eyes filled with enthusiasm. Marine hero Garp was the pride of Donghai. Do you want to go to Marine headquarters for training? Advertisement. Karen knew clearly. It seemed that Dolog should have left the letter of introduction to him in the name of Garp. Normally, when a soldier joins the Marine Corps, he usually trains at the branch. When he has gained a certain level of strength, he can choose to apply to the headquarters to participate in Marine elite training. By writing such a letter, the branch training process can be omitted, which has both advantages and disadvantages. Because the management of the Marine branch is relatively loose, the training is relatively relaxed, and it is basically training on firearms and ammunition. The Marine headquarters pays more attention to its own physical training, and also has the opportunity to come into contact with the more powerful Marine 6 styles. But similarly, the training at Marine headquarters can be described as devil training. An untrained person may not be able to persevere in these situations. Karen still remembers that in the animation, Kirby and Bellumber entered the Marine headquarters for training when they were about his age. 2,000 push-ups, 100 round-trip rope climbs, and 200 laps of long-distance running. Those who fail to complete the run in 1 hour will receive an additional 100 laps as punishment, as well as combat training, and they cannot stop until they faint. Like Karen, there are not many people who skip branch training and come directly to the headquarters, and even fewer can persist. Karen didn't think he was any worse than Kirby, so he nodded. Yes, I'm going to Marine headquarters. I heard that the training at Marine headquarters is very strong, but since you are a relative of Lieutenant General Garp, you will definitely be able to persevere. The officer nodded, looked at Karen seriously, and then called to the soldiers next to him. Take him to the branch first, and I will personally send him to the headquarters tomorrow. Marine Headquarters, Recruit Training Camp, 1996, 1997, 1998, 2000. Boom. Karen fell hard to the ground. Sweat had already wet the ground around him, and he was breathing heavily. This is his 7th day at Marine Headquarters. Because of Garp's recommendation letter, it was very smooth for him to enter Marine Headquarters. In 7 days, he completed 2,000 push-ups for the first time. 2,000 push-ups may seem like a lot, but in One Piece, a world where the average physique of each person is equal to that of a monster, it is not considered a lot of strength. Karen clenched his fists, unwilling to give in. He was not a monster, and he had no potential to become a general. He had already tried his best just by doing 2,000 push-ups. But he was unwilling to admit it, nor was he willing to give up. Advertisement. Karen thought about how she couldn't hide under the cabinet. In fact, when it comes to the hatred of the massacre, Karen does not have too strong feelings. After all, he has only been here for a few days. To him, everyone in the town is just a stranger. His hatred is more from himself. He will never forget that bloody night. But the power of hatred is very terrifying. It can whip one's heart all the time, making oneself more motivated and stronger. Not to mention the hatred he carries, he will not accept his mediocrity just by coming into this world. The majestic sea and the familiar legendary figures. Now that they have the opportunity, who wouldn't want to see them in person? He wanted to personally get to know the Whitebeard, Edward Newgate, who is known as the strongest man in the world. Mahawk, the world's greatest swordsman. The best teacher, the cute teacher who is the king of beasts. The domineering red-haired pirates, Sunshine Boy Straw Hat King Luffy. All these wishes require strong strength as support. Only with enough strength can you realize your dreams and goals. Fortunately, he also has the standard benefit for time travelers, the system. But without strength, the reputation system is useless. Cold progress bar. 17/100ths, an unknown little person. Karen had already made a decision in his mind. Since he had no reputation, he had no choice but to give in. Who says black and red are not red? The only people with the highest reputation he can currently contact are those 2 people. They are Marine recruits, Smoker and Tina, who were at the same time as Karen. Unlike Karen, who was unknown in the recruitment, Smoker and Tina can be said to be the seed players in this recruitment. Known as Marines' hope for the future, they are Marines' 2 rising stars. They all have the potential to become Marine Lieutenant Generals, and even Marine Generals may not be untouchable in the future. Compared to the prickly Smoker, Tina is undoubtedly the best choice. And Tina is the best. He already has a plan in mind. Chapter 4. Everyone looks at me. Advertisement. Thinking of this, Karen couldn't help but think of Tina. She has a tall and slender figure, with straight pink hair that is parted to the middle of her waist. She has dark brown pupils and wears red lipstick. After struggling to get up from the ground, Karen clenched her fists. Now that she had made a decision, she no longer hesitated. Returning to the dormitory, I simply took a cold shower to wash away the fatigue in my body. Looking up at himself in the mirror, he has short blonde hair and delicate cheeks that look very handsome. Karen wiped her hair and nodded with satisfaction. That's right. As expected of me, he's very handsome. Marine Recruit Training Camp Cafeteria. Karen came to the canteen early and stared at the door of the canteen. This was the only place where he could get close to Tina. Different from the serious atmosphere at the training ground, the atmosphere in the cafeteria is much more relaxed, with many recruits chatting and laughing with each other, arm around each other. After staring at the door for 5 minutes, finally seeing Tina walking in, Karen no longer hesitated and walked quickly towards Tina. Tina looked at Karen rushing towards her in shock, and looked at Karen warily. I sighed in my heart, and already had a prediction in my mind about what would happen next. It was nothing more than a confession, flowers, and love letters. As a marine beauty, I am very familiar with Karen's behavior. The person in front of me is no different from the others who have confessed to me. At most, he is more handsome. The marine recruit next to him didn't think it was strange when he saw this scene. Confessing to Tina didn't happen 2 or 3 times a week, so it was abnormal. Another guy who confesses his love to goddess Tina. This is the 5th time this week. Tina is so charming. HMPH, the toad just wants to eat swan meat. Apart from this guy being a little more handsome than me, judging from his skills, he is not even a hair above me. The recruit on the side commented to Karen unsurprisingly. Listening to the commotion around her, Tina remained unmoved, her face was calm, and she said calmly. What do you want from Tina? Seeing Tina close at hand and smelling the fragrance of the girl next to her, Karen's Adam's apple trembled slightly and he swallowed uncontrollably. Marines on the side cheered. Come on, recruit, speak out bravely. Karen took a deep breath, and when he thought of the next words, his eyes darkened. He didn't care, it was all for strength. Advertisement. Karen suddenly raised her hands, looked around, and shouted. Come on, all eyes are on me. Feeling the attention of more and more people, Karen finally understood how brave the person who shouted these words in the previous life was. No longer hesitating, fearing that he would not be able to bear the pressure and faint, he took another deep breath and shouted to everyone with all his strength. Look at me, let me announce something. Kukuro Karen, I like Tina, I love you. The whole place was silent at first, and then burst into fierce applause. Although they had seen many confessions, they had never seen such a scene. Even the person involved, Tina, was a little stunned for a moment. She has experienced many confessions, but most of them are reserved. This is the first time she has experienced a confession like Karen's in front of all Marines in public. Here I go, I was wrong. I was the clown, and I tried to persuade him to be brave. What qualifications do I have? The person who said this was the same Marine who had previously advised Karen to speak out bravely. Who? Kukuro Karen. This guy is too brave. That's a good move. I'll do the same next time when I confess. Guillaume will be very moved. A rather abstract-looking Marine kept imagining in his mind, with a longing and lewd look on his face from time to time. Is this year's Marine recruit? Kukuro Cullen? Interesting. Marine General Zephyr, who happened to be passing by, touched his chin and thought about his days as a recruit. He couldn't help but shake his head. Maybe this is what it feels like to be young, do whatever you want without any scruples. Unlike others who confessed to be with Tina, Karen's confession was just to let all the Marines present know that there was Kukuro Karen. So it doesn't matter whether you can succeed or not, as long as the goal is achieved. Of course, it's better to succeed. Karen looked at the system progress bar nervously. Sure enough, when he called out, me, Kukuro Karen, the progress bar began to rise slowly. When the progress bar reached 101/1000ths, the tight string in Karen's heart finally relaxed. Looking at Tina, who was still stunned, and the soldiers talking about each other, Karen didn't want to stay any longer. What is the difference between such a shameful confession and having S**X in public? But in order to deepen the impression of the surrounding soldiers on him, Karen had no choice but to continue the performance. At this moment, Karen seemed to be possessed by Oscar. He forced a bitter smile on his lips and said in a hoarse voice. I understand. Leaving Tina with an affectionate look in her eyes, Karen lowered her head and stumbled out of the canteen. Advertisement. Sure enough, I was rejected again. I don't know why, but I feel this guy is quite pitiful. Of course, he must feel uncomfortable being rejected in front of so many people. Looking at the pace at which he left, it's hard to imagine how sad he was. Karen's heart twitched slightly when he heard this. It was really not his intention to stumble away. It was because of the intense training that he could not walk normally at all. As Karen left, Tina also recovered from the shock, with a trace of confusion on her face. No, what does this mean? I haven't said anything yet. Why did he leave alone? Okay, let's all disperse. It doesn't matter if we all gather around the door. Zephyr, who was watching from the sidelines, watched the farce, walked in quickly, and scolded in a deep voice. Yes, Teacher Zephyr. Zephyr's eyes were serious, watching the soldiers who had restored order, and walked slowly to Tina's side, recalling the scene just now, with a slight smile on his lips. Young people are impulsive in doing things, but I can see that the person named Karen is indeed very courageous, and he probably really likes you. When Tina saw Teacher Zephyr coming, her cheeks turned red, then she gave a military salute to Teacher Zephyr, and then said seriously. Teacher Zephyr, Tina has no idea in this regard. Talking about love will affect Tina's training. Looking at the Marine star in front of him, Zephyr smiled slightly. I have to criticize you. Training is important, but falling in love is also the most important thing in life. Everything requires a balance between work and rest. Don't push yourself too hard. You are not as good as Smoker in this regard. Speaking of Smoker, Zephyr couldn't help but cover his forehead. It was obvious that the Navy also had a headache about this problem. Do you want Tina to learn Smoker? Tina asked doubtfully. Zephyr's smile froze. Thinking of Smoker's unruly character, if he could train another sailor like Smoker, Zephyr couldn't help but shudder. Don't imitate him. I'm just telling you that besides training, you have other things that are equally important. Forget it, everyone's personality is different. Just do what you like. Zephyr waved his hand, leaving Tina with an enigmatic back, turned around and left. A romance? Chapter 5 Unrivaled Skills Advertisement. Karen didn't know how he got back to the dormitory. He just felt a voice in his body, constantly urging him to find a place where no one was and find a world where no one knew him and live a good life. Forcibly calming down my shameful heart, I quickly opened the system interface. 432/1000ths. The little-known toad. Congratulations to host for achieving the goal and winning a lucky draw opportunity. Karen chuckled. Yes, it was a bit embarrassing, but the effect was undoubtedly significant. Not only did it break through 100 points, it even reached 472 points, and it is still growing. When he saw the evaluation given by the system, he instantly felt not in a good mood. If it is a little known, it will be a little known. What the hell is a toad? With my looks, I should be called a frog anyway. Karen protested vehemently, thinking hopelessly, but it didn't matter. Karen stared at the lottery button with fiery eyes. As we all know, since it is a lottery, it is best to see what is in the prize pool before the lottery, so as to have some expectations. Thinking of this, Karen carefully checked the small question mark that might appear next to the lottery. TNND. No, this system is too unreliable. Not only is there no gift package for newbies, it's hard to reach the prestige level, and even the mission rewards are unpredictable. System. Query task rewards. Karen couldn't help but roar in her heart, but our system was too cold, and it completely ignored the frantic Karen. Alas, with no other choice, Karen had no choice but to calm down and click the lottery button with anxiety. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting the reward and his unparalleled knowledge. Unparalleled knowledge. What kind of unique skill is it? Is it the 18 dragons subduing palms or the 6 meridians divine sword? Is it the 9 yang divine art? I couldn't help imagining that I would use a powerful move called Dragon Yui to beat Lovely Duo, until she cried for her father and mother. I also imagined that I would fight the Warring States period with the palm of the Tathagata, and kill Eagle Eye with the 9 swords of Dugu. Karen wiped the corners of her mouth and excitedly clicked on the unique skill. Unparalleled knowledge. Effect 1. Forcibly upgrade a skill you have mastered to the highest level, no skill selected. Advertisement effect 2. The more confident you shout out the moves, the stronger the effect. Contrary to Karen's imagination, the so-called unparalleled skill is neither Tathagata palm nor any martial arts he was familiar with in his previous life. But Karen was very satisfied with the effect, especially effect 1, and he already had an idea in his mind. As for the second effect, he needs to experiment to see how much the shouted move can benefit him. Marine Recruit Training School. It was lunchtime at this time, so there were not many people on campus. On the empty school grounds, rows of weapon racks are placed everywhere, displaying long knives, sledgehammers, axes and other weapons that need to be used. There are rows of human-shaped targets next to them, some made of stone and some made of wood. The wooden target is still moving, obviously set up to cooperate with shooting training. Karen looked at the palm prints on the stone target and couldn't calm down for a long time. He knew that the products produced by the system must be high-quality products, but he was still deeply shocked. This is the effect of him shouting out the full power of the Tathagata Divine Palm. Compared with his own moves without shouting, the increase is 100% to 500%. So scary. Karen nodded with satisfaction, looked at the moving wooden target next to him, and had an idea in his mind. Since the unparalleled skills can be applied to the palm of his hand, what about the marksmanship? He casually picked up the flintlock gun beside him. As an ordinary Blue Star Chinese, guns felt very strange to him. When he first came to the training school, he tried guns, but the accuracy still gave him a huge blow. There are very few marksmanship moves, but the most famous one must be the famous scene that has made Chinese people complain countless times. Karen raised his flintlock and stared intently at the moving rake. Gunfighting skills. Bang, hit. Karen couldn't believe it. He quickly walked towards the wooden rake he was aiming at, and finally found bullet marks on the 5th wooden rake to the left of the target wooden rake. He touched his chin in embarrassment, and while no one was paying attention, he returned to the stone target honestly and continued to test other things. As a result, a jaw-dropping scene happened at the Marine Recruit Training School. I saw a blonde boy standing next to the stone target, punching and kicking, and talking plausibly. Tathagata Divine Palm, Powerful Vajra Legs, Advertisement. T2 Kung. Thunder 8 trigrams. Boom. The stone target could no longer withstand Karen's attack and burst into pieces. Karen nodded with satisfaction, feeling filled with pride and laughing out loud. Not bad, recruit, you can actually crack a stone target in the first few days here. The officer who had been observing for a long time admired that he knew Karen, a recruit who had just arrived through a letter of introduction. I originally thought that Karen was the elite of the branch, but after observing for a few days, I found that he was just a pure recruit without any training. At first glance, it seemed that he was a young man with a background in the family and came to the Marine headquarters for gold plating, so he showed great disdain for Karen. But through these few days of observation, he found that Karen was not like the soldiers who came to the second generation for gold plating in the past. Whether it was training or work and rest, Karen behaved without any problems. Although his physical fitness is very poor, he does all the movements very well, not at all like a young military master who eats and drinks. No way, I'm still far behind. Karen gave a military salute to the officer and replied sheepishly. The officer walked up to Karen and stretched out his hand to gently tap Karen on the shoulder and said with a smile. I can tell that you didn't receive high-intensity training before coming here. After just a few days of training, it's already amazing what you can do. Karen stared blankly at the Marine officer in front of him and said with a sincere expression. Thank you for letting me know that my efforts are not in vain. Haha, kid, remember, sweat will not let down those who work hard, but if you want to become stronger, it cannot be accomplished in a day. Training like you seems to be working very hard, but it is extremely detrimental to future development. Without scientific training, planning and nutritional supplements, you will only develop in the wrong direction. After hearing the officer's words, Karen knew that he was doing it for his own good, so he nodded quickly and said in a deep voice, "Understood, sir." The officer nodded with satisfaction. You are currently at the Marine Recruit Training Camp, and in 7 days it will be the selection day for the Marine Elite Training Camp. There is training under the personal guidance and training of former Marine General Black Arm Zephyr. If you can enter there, you will have the opportunity to learn our Marine's core skills, Marine 6 styles. If I can graduate from the Elite Training Camp, I can at least become an ensign. I graduated from the Elite Training Camp, and I became a major right after graduation. Speaking of this, the officer spoke with a hint of reminiscence and pride. Karen looked at the Marine officer in front of him in surprise with a cigar in his mouth and slightly squinted eyes. He could become a major just after graduation. This officer was definitely not an easy man. You are? My name is Huo Shaoshan, Chapter 6 Goal, Trials. Advertisement. It turned out to be him. Huo Shaoshan is one of the few named Marines in the plot. He is Lieutenant General Marine when he appears. But the animation is called One Piece, not Marine Fleet Admiral, so Karen only knows about Huo Shaoshan by name. Thanks for reminding me. Do you know what specific tests will be conducted in the Elite Training Camp? The Elite Training Camp is also called the General Training Camp, so his assessment is not only about physical fitness and ability, but also about his background. Huo Shaoshan took out a puff of cigarette and said with a smile, "However, the origins that can block most people have no effect on you." Is it because of my letter of recommendation? Karen had the answer in her mind. Lieutenant General Garp's letter of recommendation is your stepping stone to enter the Elite Training Camp, Huo Shaoshan said with a smile. Although you have a stepping stone to enter the training camp, in my opinion, you'd better give up this time. You don't have the strength to enter the Elite Training Camp yet. But you can give it a try and see the gap between you and the recruits at the same time. You said that after entering the Elite Training Camp, you will have the opportunity to learn the 6th form of Marine. As for life return, I remember that this is also a very powerful skill. Karen asked aloud. I really underestimate you. You still know about life return, but life return is also a very powerful skill, and as long as you enter the Elite Training Camp, you can access it. Huo Shaoshan looked at Karen in surprise, and then added, however, life return is different from the Marine 6th form. It is also very powerful. It's just the Marine 6th form. As long as you work hard, you can definitely learn it. Returning life requires not only extremely strong talent, but also a long period of precipitation, so there are not many people in the Marine who can return life. Can you? Karen really didn't know that learning to return life requires such a high talent. Haha, I only know a little bit about it. Huo Shaoshan smiled awkwardly. Is Fei Mao easy to learn? Karen asked as if she didn't hear Huo Shaoshan's embarrassment. What I mean by superficial knowledge is that I have learned. Understood. Faced with Karen's questioning, Huo Shaoshan quickly explained. It's good to be eager to learn, but it's useless to only know the basics. Huo Shaoshan really doesn't understand why Karen attaches so much importance to the return of life. Although the return of life is powerful, it requires a long period of practice to become a Grand Master. Thank you, I know. I will sign up. Karen nodded and sincerely thanked Huo Shaoshan. Karen exhaled a long breath. As long as he is eager to learn, it doesn't matter even if it is superficial, as long as he can learn it, he can forcibly improve the return of life to the highest level. Advertisement. When he saw the effect of the unparalleled magic for the first time, he had a clear goal, which was to return his life. The first time I learned about the return of life was in the Judiciary Island chapter. It was introduced by Kumaori, a member of CP9, who had lived in the mountains for 1,000 years, sat on the sea for 1,000 years, lived in the open air and practiced the immortal way, and finally achieved the return of life. Life return is to consume food crazily in a short period of time to make the body fat, and then use life return to digest and lose weight. After that, you can control any organ in the body such as hair and internal organs at will. The person who makes the best use of life return is not Kumatori, but our protagonist, Luffy. As we all know, the most important reason why Luffy is able to do sit-ups repeatedly is that after every battle, he will recover his physical energy by ingesting food and resurrect with full blood. There is no doubt that Luffy has the master-level ability to return life. This ability is exactly what Karen needs most. As long as he learns to return his life, he will have a steady stream of energy and can train his physical fitness without any scruples. Therefore, he is determined to get his life back. After briefly chatting with Huo Shaoshan for a while, Karen returned to intense training. There are still 7 days left before the Elite Training Camp selection. He is unwilling to give up this rare opportunity. He will enter as early as possible. The training lasted until night before Karen stopped and simply went to have dinner. After training for a while, Karen returned to the dormitory to rest. Marine Headquarters, Marine Fenduo, Marine Fleet Admiral Office. Are there any impressive applicants for this elite selection? Marine Fleet Admiral Cyborg Kong looked at Zephyr and said with a smile. There are a few more interesting ones. Zephyr handed several compiled file rosters to Cyborg Kong. Smoker, Tina, Rosinante. Cyborg Kong's eye looked at it carefully several times and nodded with satisfaction. Although this class does not have geniuses like Sakaski, Perusalino, and Kuzan, it is still pretty good and there are still a few good prospects. When talking about this year's selection, Zephyr also smiled. Advertisement. The trials will be held in 7 days. How do you plan to test them? Marine General Sengoku asked with interest. Isn't this a question you would ask? Before Zephyr could answer, Garp grabbed a handful of senbei and asked doubtfully. As a good friend of Sengoku, Garp knew how busy Sengoku was. He and Sengoku Zephyr were in the same class. He himself refused to be promoted to general because he did not want to serve the celestial dragons. Zephyr doubted his own ideas because of an incident many years ago and chose to devote himself to cultivating the younger generation for Marine. Under the intentional training of Fleet Admiral, all kinds of military affairs in the army basically fell on Sengoku. During Zephy's training at the military academy, Sengoku basically never asked about the military academy. Because his son is also on the selection list, Zephyr cleared up his doubts to Garp with a serious expression. Son? Oh, it's him. That kid also participated in this year's elite selection. Garp obviously also knew Rosinante. Well, he is an excellent Marine. I believe you will not let me down, Sengoku said with a smile on his face, full of confidence in his adopted son. The person you recommended also participated in this assessment, why didn't you ask? Zephyr looked at Garp and said. Who? Me? Garp was stunned for a moment, then grabbed a handful of senbei and stuffed it into his mouth, saying vaguely. Ha ha ha, since it was recommended by me, it must be fine. Really, that's not necessarily the case, Zephyr said meaningfully. What do you mean? Isn't it possible that Garp, the person who recommends fake goods, can't do it? Senguo looked confused. Just as Garp understood him, he also understood Garp. Although Garp seems unreliable on the surface, Sengoku believes in Garp's vision. He also thinks the same as Garp. Since it is recommended by Garp, there will be no problem. Zephyr said nothing, took out a stack of files from his arms and handed it to Warring States. Name. Kukulo Cullen. Age, 17 years old. Address, Donghai, Srili Town. Family background. Orphan. Physical fitness, average. Evaluation. An ordinary person with no foundation, trains hard, but the training time is short and the strength is poor. Recommended by Marine Lieutenant General Garp, Chapter 7 Black Wrist Method. Advertisement in the blink of an eye, 7 days passed quickly. In addition to eating and sleeping these days, Karen has been training at the school almost all the time. Although there are only 7 days of training, it may be because the average physique of the people in this world is strong, and he feels that he has improved greatly. Am I still a genius? Karen thought narcissistically. In addition, after the fermentation in the past few days, the progress bar of the system has also increased a lot. 765 1/1000ths. We are almost reaching our goal for the next draw. This made him regret a little. Maybe he shouldn't train these days, but instead find a few more famous people to practice with. Maybe he can break through the 1000 mark. Once again, he was qualified for a lottery. If he got a Saiyan's physique, he wouldn't have to work hard. With your strong physique, you can reach the peak of your life and marry Hancock, Shirahoshi, Nami, Robin, Tatsuki, Tina, Gion, Kazuki Hiyori, Khalifa. A smile gradually appeared at the corner of Karen's mouth. She didn't know what she thought of, and her smile gradually faded. The Marine recruit standing nearby looked at Karen, who had a fantasy look on his face, and moved his body speechlessly, quietly moving away from him. The slight movement woke Karen up from his fantasy. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth, looked at the recruit who was far away from him, pretended to be calm, smiled awkwardly, and asked. Brother, we have been waiting for so long, when will the selection start? The recruit looked at Karen with disgust and said angrily. I don't know this, but I heard that not only Teacher Zephyr, but also the Warring States General and Lieutenant General Garp will come to observe. So this time, everyone who had not planned to sign up now wants to give it a try. If the general can remember his name, he will surely be able to rise to prominence in the future. What a great ambition, are you sure about it? It was okay at first, but there are too many people signing up this time, and I don't know. It doesn't matter, just try your best. Karen wanted to ask a few more questions, but found that the recruit next to him suddenly stood upright, staring intently at the high platform in the distance. The high platform is not too high, but it can barely allow people behind to see the people standing on it. The person standing on it has short purple hair and a white cloak with justice written on it behind him. He is tall, with explosive muscles exposed, and has a solemn expression. It is none other than Marine General Black Arm Zephyr. Karen respects the tragic hero in front of him from the bottom of his heart. He is the hero of justice. Black Arm Zephyr, the general who does not kill, the person who trains all lieutenant generals, Teacher Zephyr. A man who has dedicated his life to Marine, he has defeated countless pirates, but has never killed any enemy. However, because his family was killed in revenge by the pirates he let go, Zephyr began to doubt whether his not killing was correct, and then moved to the rear. Advertisement. He transferred his passion for the rest of his life to cultivating young Marines, and was called by Garp the man who cultivated all Marines. Later, Zephyr led a team of intern recruits, who were attacked by pirates and had one arm cut off. Only 2 recruits survived. Later, he learned that the pirates who attacked him were recruited by Marine and became the 7 warlords of the sea. Zephyr was completely disappointed with Marine and quit Marine to form Neo Marine. In the end, he was killed by the students he personally trained. At this time, Zephyr had not yet experienced the attack by Whitebeard II. Because of the revenge on his family, all his love for his family was devoted to young recruits. Of course, admiration is one thing, but whether you want to be such a person is another. Looking at Marine standing upright, Zephyr nodded with satisfaction, walked slowly to the center of the high platform, and said loudly, "Very good. I'm in good spirits. My name is Zephyr. I believe you have all heard of my name more or less. I am your chief instructor. The ones who come to sign up for the selection are all outstanding ones who think they are pretty good. I know many of you and have been in contact with them. There are geniuses from the Marine branch, elites from all over the world, and past eliminations." Looking at the unresponsive crowd, Zephyr paused and continued. "But, here, I hope you can forget all your previous identities. There is only one identity you need to remember, the selectors of the elite training camp. You don't have to worry too much when you come here, you just need to go all out, do you understand?" "Clear." Infected by the atmosphere, all the recruits present responded loudly. "Yes, very impressive. I hope your performance will not disappoint me." Zephyr nodded with satisfaction. "Next, I will tell you the rules of selection. The rules are simple, there are only 2 items. First item, have you seen the power value tester in front of the wooden platform? As long as the value you swing is greater than 500, you will be selected." As he spoke, Zephyr pointed to the rows of machines under the wooden platform, which was a sledgehammer testing machine similar to what Karen had seen in his previous life. "In a while, you will take the tests one by one in order. If you meet the standards, you can move on to the next test." "Okay, don't waste time, let's get started." With that said, Zephyr walked down the high platform and walked towards Garp and Sengoku who were standing below. Sengoku watched this scene with great interest and couldn't help but sigh. "It's better here. It has the atmosphere of youth. I really envy you. You can train with so many energetic young people. Unlike me, I stay in the same place every day, surrounded by countless military documents." "Humph, you envy me. You might as well envy him." Zephyr looked at Garp speechlessly, who was still standing drowsily. "Haha, I can't learn this." Warring States shook his head helplessly. Advertisement as Warring States and Zephyr exchanged words, the test was in full swing. Jace. Power value. 367, unqualified. Victor. Power value. 530, qualified. "Next, Smoker," shouted the instructor standing nearby. "Is this year's new star?" Sangguo looked at Smoker curiously. "Yeah." Zephyr also looked at Smoker, also very interested in his power value. Instructor kindly reminded. "Just hit the machine as hard as you can. You have 2 chances." HMPH, that's verbose. Smoker geared up. Drink. 786, qualified. "Congratulations, wait a minute, didn't you say you have 2 chances? Smoker spat, moved his wrist, took a deep breath, and attacked with all his strength. Drink. 827, hey, you passed the test, congratulations. Smoker took the qualification medal from Instructor and turned to leave without looking back. The 827 power points attracted the attention of the recruits present. In the face of most people who could only hit around 300 power points, Smoker's strength was staggering. The recruit standing next to Karen looked at Smoker with admiration and murmured softly. "As expected of this year's recruiting leader, my strength is not simple. It will be great if I can play at such a high level." Karen looked at Smoker thoughtfully. Although Smoker is basically a soy sauce in the later stage, as the first character to appear in Logia in the plot, he still exerts a strong sense of oppression on Luffy. "But I believe that as long as I can learn to return my life, my future achievements will definitely be higher than his. But the most important thing right now is to pass this test." Chapter 8 Roger is coming advertisement. It's really a thorn in the side, Warring States said, holding a file. "If you're not afraid of being stabbed in the head, you're afraid of being incompetent." Zephyr was noncommittal. "How old was Sakazuki back then?" Warring States asked. "You are so confused, there was no such thing back then," Zephyr mocked. Warring States laughed and turned his attention to the test machine again. The test continued. Steinbeck. Power value. 538, qualified. Rosinante. Dow power value. 766, qualified. "How is it? Are you relieved now?" Zephyr glanced at Warring States, who looked calm and calm. "Haha, there is nothing to worry about. I believe you will be able to do it." Warring States stroked the lamb beside him, his expression could not hide his excitement. Zephyr looked at Warring States in a funny way, and suddenly felt envious of him. Warring States had someone he was looking forward to, but what about himself? "If my child grows up, he will probably be as old as him. What are you thinking about? Although I have no family, all the Marines here are my family." The sad mood only lasted for a breath, and Zephyr woke up from his memories. He was such a person who never showed his fragile side. Next, Kukulo Cullen. "I don't know why, everyone else calls me by my first name, but only Karen is called by my first and last name." Hearing this familiar name, Zephyr turned his attention to the test again. Sengoku glanced at Garp who was concentrating with his eyes closed, and then looked at Karen who was walking forward. Short blonde hair, handsome facial features, and a tall and straight figure. When he saw him for the first time, Warring States had to admit that Karen was very good-looking and energetic. But he also believed that Garp would not recommend Karen because of his good looks, so Karen must have something special about him, but he hasn't noticed it yet. At the same time, he also discovered that not only was he staring at Karen, but the moment he heard Karen's name, many recruit instructors were staring at Karen. It seems that my guess is good. This little guy is very famous in the recruiting camp. He is Kukulo Cullen, the recruit who bravely confessed his love in the cafeteria. Yes, I heard that after his confession was rejected, he wouldn't even be able to leave. The soldiers who heard Karen's name talked a lot. They had only heard of Karen's deeds, but had never seen Karen himself. Tina couldn't help but glance at the familiar name. As another protagonist of the story, people have been talking about her every time she walks around in the past few days. However, since Karen confessed her love to her that day and was rejected, those annoying flies in the past have not continued to harass her. Advertisement Karen felt everyone's attention and walked to the test machine pretending to be calm. He nodded to the instructor and said solemnly, "I'm ready." "Very well, you have 2 chances, let's get started." Karen couldn't help but start to get nervous. This test was a test related to whether he could reach the top of his life in the future. No longer hesitating, clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and suddenly exerted force. Thunder 8 trigrams. Peeved, Warring States, who was still drinking tea comfortably, couldn't hold it back anymore. What did he hear? Thunder 8 trigrams. Isn't this Kaido's famous stunt? Could this guy be Kaido's disciple? Is he the mole planted by Kaido in Marine? This suspicion didn't last long. The next second, Warring States realized that he was overthinking. Power value. 467, unqualified. Are you kidding me? Kaido's Thunder 8 trigrams only has so much power. If Kaido finds out. Ha ha ha, interesting. Warring States couldn't help laughing. Zephyr couldn't help but lower his head and hold his forehead, suppressing a smile. The name is very loud, but it's a pity that the training was too short. Ever since he accidentally saw Karen's Declaration of Independence that day, he couldn't help but go back and retrieve Karen's information. So he clearly understood that Karen was just a pure rookie who had been trained for less than a month. There was nothing special except that he was recommended by Garp. This guy is pretty good. He can achieve such a high level of power after just a few days of training. He has great potential. Indeed, it is indeed recommended by Garp, but this selection is indeed too early for him. The Warring States period returned to its original calmness and said with emotion. Power value. 467, unqualified. Do you want to continue? Instructor reminded. Well, I'll try again. Karen's eyes were calm, but he was unwilling to give up. If he moved his wrist, he would have another chance. Staring at the test machine, he calmed down a little, took a deep breath, let his energy sink into his dantian, suddenly exerted his strength, and shouted. Advertisement. God avoids, peeved, as expected, it was Sengoku again. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Just now it was Kaido's thundering 8 trigrams, and now there is another One Piece Roger's divine avoidance. He doesn't know how many surprises this recruit has. What? Roger is coming. Garp, who had been sleeping, opened his eyes at some point and looked around to find Roger. Idiot. Roger has been dead a long time ago. Zephyr looked at the excited Garp speechlessly. Fart. I just heard someone shouting God's avoidance. Garp glared at Zephyr and looked around him warily. Power value. 512, qualified. The cold sound of the machine came belatedly. It was successful. Karen breathed a sigh of relief and raised his hand to the instructor. Before the instructor handed over the certificate of metal passed by the representative to Karen, Karen's eyes only felt dazzled, and Garp suddenly appeared in front of Karen's eyes. If I heard correctly, the divine refuge came from this place. Garp stared at Karen. Although he was asking, he was very sure that it was the young man in front of him who shouted Shenyu. Karen screamed inwardly and then remembered that Garp was also present. Although Garp was a Marine, his relationship with One Piece Roger was quite complicated. Rather than saying they're enemies, it would be more accurate to say they're enemies who appreciate each other. Even Roger's chosen orphan before his death was Garp. I shouted. Karen had to admit, you know Roger? I don't know. Then why do you avoid it? I just think this name is very domineering. I chose it randomly. Of course Karen would not say that she knew Roger. You know, no matter how much Garp admires Roger, Garp has never forgotten his identity. He is a Marine. One Piece after Roger's death, everyone who knew him suffered a reckoning. Domineering? You shouted randomly? Garp looked at Karen suspiciously. Yes, isn't it very domineering to have a move that even gods avoid? Hockey is domineering, but when you shout it from your mouth, it feels a bit insulting to this move. Garp glanced at the value on the test machine, 512. A hole. Why do you have so much power with such a domineering move? Garp was furious and slapped the machine casually. Boom. Power value. 9,000, qualified. Chapter 9 Garp's Education. Advertisement. The whole place was silent. Although they had known about Garp's terror, when the 9,000 power value was clearly displayed in front of everyone, everyone took a breath. So scary. You know, this is just a casual shot from Garp. Karen looked at this scene dumbfounded and thought to himself, he is indeed a person who can force one piece to flee several times. Garp. B******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** of Garp. Hey, don't talk nonsense, I'm just interested in this recruit who yelled, God's avoidance. Garp waved his hand, and then roared. Why are you shouting so loudly? What? Do you want to fight? Zephyr was not to be outdone. Do it. Do it. Looking at the two people who looked like children, Zhang Guo had no choice but to stand up and said in a deep voice. Hole, come back quickly, isn't it embarrassing? Who are you? Come down and I'll beat you too. Although Garp said this, he had already started walking towards the Warring States period. Huh, okay, let's continue, Zephyr said in a deep voice. Who is that? You can actually let Lieutenant General Garp and Teacher Zephyr go there in person. The Marine recruit standing behind didn't know what happened. You don't even know him. This is a ruthless man who confessed his love in front of Teacher Zephyr and many soldiers. Soldiers who knew Karen began to educate those who were interested in him. It turned out to be the guy who confessed his love in front of Teacher Zephyr. What? The ruthless person who confessed his love to Teacher Zephyr. Ding. Congratulations to host for achieving the goal. You will get a chance to draw a lottery. Karen looked at Garp and Zephyr walking away with a blank look on his face, and suddenly a voice came from his mind. Does this meet the standard? Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Karen walked to the instructor, showed a shy smile, and asked, did I pass? Oh, passed. Here, this is your passing medal. You can move freely now. Wait until the afternoon for the second assessment. As long as you can complete it, you can enter the elite training camp. Instructor secretly remembered Karen's appearance and handed a badge to Karen. Okay, thanks. Karen reached out to take the medal, politely said thank you, and walked quickly to the dormitory. Advertisement. He originally wanted to watch it for a while, but the system prompt just now made him not want to wait any longer. How is it? Zephyr looked at Karen leaving and asked Warring States. Are you sure he didn't undergo any other training before coming? Zhang Guo raised his eyes and said in a deep voice. He is an orphan, or he was not an orphan a month ago. Zephyr answered the question. Who did it? Warring States stared at Zephyr. Pirate. Zephyr looked calm. Warring States breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid of hearing a different answer from Zephyr's mouth. Hate is really a terrible thing. Zephyr sighed. Do you know him? Sengoku turned to Garp and asked. Who? That kid just now. Why should I know him? Garp looked confused. After getting this answer, Warring States tapped his fingers, thoughtfully. Donghai, Sreeli Town, Karen, Garp. Zephyr looked at Garp strangely and said jokingly, Isn't this guy your illegitimate son? Hole, I think you really want to fight with me. Garp glared at Zephyr, looking like he really wanted to take action. Since you don't know him, how did he get your recommendation letter? Zephyr looked at Garp and wondered. Garp was also a little confused, and he tried to think hard. After a while, he heard the sound of Garp sleeping soundly. Warring States looked at Garp speechlessly. After a while, his brows suddenly relaxed and he affirmed. It's Mengchi D. Dolog. This little guy has met Mengchi D. Dolog. Garp, who had just fallen asleep, stood up sleepily, his face full of doubts. He was really convinced. He slept for a while and heard Shenbi, slept for a while again, and heard Dorag's name again. Dolog? How does he know Dolog? Zephyr also looked puzzled, waiting for Warring States' explanation. I have received information before that Mengchi D. Dolog appeared in the East China Sea a month ago. And Karen also happens to be from Donghai, and has a recommendation letter from Garp. I think he is the only one who can get a recommendation letter from Garp. So Mengchi D. Dolog recommended Karen to come here. Is Karen an informant of Dolog? Zephyr guessed. Advertisement, impossible. Dorag is not so stupid and would not leave such an obvious flaw to us. Warring States shook his head, denying Zephyr's guess. Since Karen can get Dolag's recommendation letter, it means that Karen has been recognized by Dolog and refuses to join the Revolutionary Army. Warring States drank a glass of water and gave the answer. In other words, this little guy is a person who yearns for Marine wholeheartedly, Zephyr continued. Sengoku nodded and shook his head. Rather than yearning for Marine, it's better to say I hate pirates. As a Marine-wise general, Sengoku thought far more profoundly than Zephyr. But what he will never understand is that Karen is a time traveler and he has hatred, but the hatred is not as strong as Sengoku imagined. Joining Marine is just because Marine is more suitable for Karen's obscene development. But no matter what, it is a good thing for him to join Marine now. I believe in Marine's enthusiasm. Zephyr nodded with satisfaction. Yes, he has goals, talent, and hatred. I am very optimistic about him. HMPH, it turns out that Brad Dorag recommended him. It's so embarrassing to recommend such a weak person. Garp also understood what was going on and couldn't help but muttered. Zephyr laughed loudly after hearing this. Haha, you guessed wrong this time. Although Karen is weak now, he is undoubtedly a talented person. The power value of an ordinary person without training is only 10 points. Even if he trains hard for a month, it will only be 100 points at most. And he can score 512 points, which is definitely a freak. Maybe we will have another Sakaski in Marine. Speaking of which, Dorag recommended a talent to our Marine. Hearing Zephy's praise of Dolog, Garp also liked Zephyr a lot. Although Dolog left Marine, he has always been proud of Dolog. He knew in his heart that Dolog was braver than himself. Although he refused to be promoted to general to serve the Tianlong people several times, he was not as good as Dolog. Haha, since it is the person recommended by Dorag, then this brat named Karen will be in charge of me from now on. Get out! Warring States and Zephyr roared at the same time. It's not that I don't believe in Garp's level, it's just that you look at the people Garp teaches. One is named Kuzan, who is also one of the best among Marine lieutenant generals, but he is known as Lazy Justice. He is a man who can fall asleep even standing up, and he is in the same vein as Garp. The other one is even more exaggerated, Mungchi D. Dorag, the son of Garp, is of course also very powerful. But now, not only has he left Marine, he has also established a revolutionary army that is an enemy of the world government. He is rated by the world government, the man who is the most evil criminal in the world. If he continues to teach, Warring States and Zephyr shuddered at the same time. Chapter 10 Answer advertisement. Back in the dormitory, Karen did not rush to draw the lottery, but simply washed up first, then looked at the time, and waited until the hour. Open the system interface in your mind. 2,338 10,000ths. A speculator with a reputation, it is still very simple, with only a few strokes. But the evaluation has changed from a little-known toad to a well-known speculator. Karen was very puzzled by the change in evaluation, but it didn't matter, speculators sounded much better than toads. With the excitement in my heart, I clicked the word, luck draw, in my mind. Although this was Karen's second lottery draw, he was still very excited. Although he still doesn't know what rewards are in the prize pool, it doesn't stop Karen from fantasizing in his mind. God bless, God bless. Give me a Saiyan bloodline. Shushan swordsmanship, strange fire, martial soul, ninjutsu, Sharingan, devil fruit. With an excited heart and trembling hands, Karen looked nervously at the lottery interface. In the afternoon, the elite selection field. Compared with the huge crowds in the morning, there were not many people coming to the school grounds now. Karen took a cursory glance and found that there were probably more than 600 people. These are all Marine elites with a power value greater than 500. All the Marines present were chatting excitedly. Unexpectedly, you also passed the first item. Tina slowly walked to Karen and said with interest. Lucky, lucky. Karen looked embarrassed. Since the last time he confessed to Tina in order to gain 100 reputation points, he has not continued to look for Tina. How can there be so much luck? If you pass, you will pass. Tina recognizes your strength. The topic changed and Tina smiled and said, however, Tina does not recognize your courage. Karen didn't know what it meant to not recognize his courage. They spread it everywhere that Tina rejected your confession, but in fact only Tina and you knew that Tina didn't say anything at the time. Tina crossed her arms and her smile gradually cooled. Well, that's it. I saw that you didn't answer at that time, so I thought you were embarrassed to refuse, so I turned around and walked away. Karen was quick to think, and explained with a slight guilt. Advertisement. He really didn't expect that not only would this matter have a follow-up, but the person involved would also come to find him. Really, so you were thinking about Tina at that time? Tina's face was neither happy nor sad. Yes. No, if you were thinking about Tina, you wouldn't confess to Tina in front of so many people. After a pause, Tina continued. You wouldn't choose to confess your love in public. Karen understood what she meant. Confessing something in public seemed very romantic, but if there was no emotional foundation, it would only make it difficult for the person being confessed to get off the stage. As for him, let alone feelings, he has never even met Tina before, so it makes no sense to consider Tina. Because you are so beautiful, after I saw you, I confessed my love to you as soon as I could. I didn't think too much about it. I didn't react until I said it. It was very disrespectful. It makes sense for an impulsive young man to rush out and confess his love to the girl he likes. Is that so? Okay, Tina reluctantly agreed. Tina took out a box of women's cigarettes from her arms, took out one and lit it, and blew out a puff of smoke at Karen. Don't you want to know the answer that day? Karen was also a smoker in his previous life, but he didn't seem to have much contact with this body, and he felt like he was being choked for a moment. I coughed a few times, a little confused. What does it mean? Do you know the answer that day? Could it be that the confession was successful? Karen was a little at a loss. He admitted that this body was indeed handsome, but it wasn't so charming that everyone could love it and make flowers bloom. He had never thought about the successful confession. It didn't mean that he didn't have lust, but in his heart, how could he waste his time on falling in love after finally reviving his life? The reason why he confessed was that he needed to use Tina's reputation to enhance his strength. In his heart, only becoming stronger is the path he wants to take. As the saying goes, if you bloom, butterflies will come. There is never a shortage of strong-willed people in the world. As long as you are strong, will you still be short of beautiful women to accompany you? Of course, if Tina really agreed, he would not refuse. Tina is not only a very charming beauty, but she is also very capable. Looking at the man who was choked by the cigarette and was at a loss, Tina chuckled at the corner of her mouth. How is it, do you want to know? Karen came back to his senses and showed an expression expecting a surprise. I want to know, are you willing? Tina put out the cigarette in her mouth, left a sweet smile, turned and left without saying a word. Left. Karen's mouth twitched slightly, and he looked at Tina who was leaving in a funny way. Advertisement funny woman. What a kid with personality. So by saying so much, is it revenge? Hello, are you Kukulo Cullen? Before Karen's thoughts could turn around, a gentle voice came from behind Karen. Karen turned around and saw a tall, thin man with yellow hair and a gentle smile greeting him. The person coming was very tall, and Karen had to look up to see him clearly. With just one glance, Karen recognized the identity of the person coming. Don Quixote Rosinante was originally a celestial dragon, but he and his family later voluntarily gave up their identity as a celestial dragon. He saw Doflamingo, his older brother, kill his father with his own hands, and then fled and was adopted by Marine General Sengoku as his adopted son. In the subsequent plot, undercover Doflamingo serves as a cadre and collects evidence against Doflamingo for Marine. The ending of the story is also full of tragedy. In order to save Luo, Rosinante not only betrayed the pirates, but also betrayed Marine. Hello. Who are you? Karen asked calmly. My name is Rosinante, and I am also a recruit selected in this selection, Rosinante said. Oh, what's the matter with you? Karen said curiously. It's okay, I just heard about your deeds and I'm curious about you. Karen's mouth twitched slightly, she didn't expect that her simple confession would attract so many people's attention. Also, I heard that you came here recently? Rosinante asked. Yes, I've only been here 2 weeks, Karen said truthfully. Since you just came here, you probably don't have many friends. Rosinante guessed, then looked around and explained. I see that they are all in groups of 2 or 3. You are the only one who is alone. I don't have many friends, so I wanted to get to know you. Oh, that's it, thank you. Karen understood clearly in her heart. It turned out that she was looking for him because she was too lonely, and wanted to bring him to integrate with the Marine group. What a gentle person. Karen smiled slightly at Rosinante's kindness and stretched out her hand. Hello, my name is Kukulo Cullen, nice to meet you. Chapter 11 I have a showdown advertisement Marine Headquarters, Marine Fenduo. Elite Selection School. It was almost noon now, and the sun was beating down hard, like a great fireball, making the ground smoke. Karen didn't do anything, just standing here, already sweating profusely. Ta-ta-ta. A burst of neat footsteps came from far and near, and penetrated into the ears of every recruit. Soon, the originally noisy school grounds became quiet, everyone stood up straight and stared straight ahead. I saw a neat and majestic group of Marine officers walking in front of the school grounds. Walking at the front was none other than the chief instructor of the Marine Recruit Training Camp, Black Wrist Zephyr. Among the instructors, Karen immediately saw Huo Shaoshan, who had spoken to him before, and he was also there. Not only the instructor, but behind the instructor there were rows of medical soldiers holding stretchers looking at the recruits solemnly. Very good, there are many more people who have passed the selection this year than in previous years, but... Zephyr looked around the recruit, nodded with satisfaction, and then paused. But, there are too many people. There are a total of 612 of you here, and we only accept 300 people for this selection. So, what will happen next is a test phase and a phase out until 300 people are retained. Ah, how could this happen? The second test was so cruel. More than half of them were eliminated directly? Oh, there is no way. After all, there are more people who passed the selection this time. It is said that in previous years, only more than 200 people were accepted. As soon as Zephyr finished speaking, the recruits in the school field began to whisper, some of them looked calm, and they were obviously very confident in their own abilities. Some were downcast and looked depressed. Karen was also shocked by the cruelty of this selection. His ability to pass the first selection was due to the bonus of his unparalleled skills. I have no confidence in this second selection either. For a while, I felt a little discouraged and at a loss. The moment he had this idea, Karen warned herself in her heart. It's just a test. If you can succeed, just try your best. Even if you fail this time, it's a big deal and you can try again next time. Quiet. I know it's hard for some of you to accept, but it's the truth. Zephyr roared angrily and suppressed the turbulent recruit. He looked seriously and continued. The next selection is very simple. It is running around the school field. As for how many laps to run. Zephyr paused and showed a cold smile. Advertisement. Then it depends on the comrades around you. If you can't hold on, you can give up. But it's important to note that I'm talking about running, not walking, so it won't work if the speed is too slow. In other words, when there are only 300 people who give up, the 300 people who persist will be considered qualified. Now all the recruits understood why Zephyr led a team of medical soldiers over. It turned out that he wanted to tell them not to be afraid, they would never die from exhaustion. Looking at everyone who was still stunned, Zephyr roared again. What are you still doing? Let's start. Following Zephyr's order, the recruits began to move sparsely. Ta-ta-ta. Don't you understand? I said run. Just after moving a few steps, Zephy's bell-like voice reached every recruit's ears. Those who are slow will be eliminated directly, do you understand? Clear. Smoker looked at the sloppy recruit with cold eyes, took the lead, suddenly increased his speed, and rushed out. His speed suddenly became very conspicuous among the recruits. Slowly, other recruits also began to accelerate. Under the scorching sun, the recruits who had just run a few laps were sweating profusely and gritting their teeth to persist. They are all top recruits and certainly won't complain about the weather. Karen in the crowd won't complain. Although he has just arrived in this world, the training in the past 2 weeks has made him accustomed to it. It's just that in the past training, he would set a goal for himself to give himself something to look forward to. Okay, let me see the gap between me and these elites. Running seems easy, but he knows that running requires skills. Running cannot just focus on the feet. Running posture and coordination are crucial to speed. Karen worked hard to adjust her breathing, focused her eyes forward, and let her hands swing naturally with the movements. People will encounter resistance when they run, so Karen followed closely a recruit in front of him who was about the same speed as himself. Running like this can save a lot of energy. Karen didn't remember how many laps he ran, and he didn't know how many people chose to give up. He only felt that his footsteps became heavier and his breathing began to become disordered. Gradually, a voice in Karen's heart kept urging him. Forget it, that's it, give up. Advertisement, you have only been training for a few days and you are already doing very well. Even if you fail this time, you will still have a chance next time. Just when he had the idea of giving up, Karen shook his head subconsciously. No, he couldn't give up. Giving up is easy, but giving up is addictive. If he gives up this time, will he have to give up again next time he encounters this kind of situation? Oh, it would be great if I could do Ching Gong, Karen muttered, and suddenly he had an idea in his heart. Wait a minute, I think I really know how to do this. Since the unique skill can bless the hands, what about the legs? To understand this, Karen just wanted to give herself a mouthful. Damn it, why did I just remember such a simple truth? No more hesitation, he whispered in his mouth, Lingbo Weebu. Then, Karen suddenly felt that his feet seemed to become a lot lighter. Really works. Although it was only a little lighter, Karen still felt it. Sure enough, God is really helping me. Karen was ecstatic in her heart. She raised her head and looked around, only to find that there were not many people who gave up. Everyone was running quietly. Also, if they have the idea of giving up, they will not become the best recruiters. Except for a few people who are very confident in their own strength, most of them are like Karen, who find a few people with the same speed as themselves and form small groups to run silently. Running next to Karen was Rosinante, who had a strength score of 766 during the strength test. Among all the elite recruits, he is definitely considered the elite among the elite. Somehow, instead of running away from the group like Smoker, he chose to move forward silently in the group. After running for so long, his breathing was still very steady. At this time, he was looking forward, his eyes a little vacant, and he didn't know what he was thinking. It was at this time that he suddenly heard Karen next to him seeming to be mumbling something, so he turned his head curiously and said, What did you say? Karen raised his head. He didn't expect that he would be discovered despite being so quiet. Feeling the lightness of his footsteps, his face darkened. Now that he had been discovered, he would no longer hide it. He gritted his teeth and said, I originally planned to get along with you as an ordinary person, but I stopped pretending. I'm going to show off my cards. What? Rosinante picked his ears, but he couldn't hear something clearly. Karen smiled contemptuously and shouted, 9 heavens thunder kicks with 2 feet. Chapter 12 He chases, he escapes advertisement. The sudden voice caused the marine soldiers to look sideways. The marines next to Karen trembled and their breathing was somewhat disordered. What are you doing? Rosinante was also frightened by this voice and asked stammeringly. Haha, I'm sorry. This is my habit. When I run, I like to shout cheers twice. Karen scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. He couldn't help it. One of the requirements of the unique skill was to shout it loudly. Oh, okay, come on. Rosinante suddenly understood and gave Karen a thumbs up. Sure enough, the moment Karen shouted, he felt that his steps became much lighter and even his breathing became much smoother. So next, whenever Karen felt that his steps became heavy, he would give a loud shout. Konoha whirlwind. Lingbo Weebu, 9 heavens thunder kicks with 2 feet. Although he knew that Karen shouted out to cheer him up, every time Karen shouted out, the recruits around him were inevitably startled. I said, buddy, you can shout as long as you want. Can you please keep your voice down? The recruit who was running in front of Karen finally couldn't help turning his head and complained. Oops, I'm sorry, it feels more exciting if I shout it out. After experiencing so much, Karen's face has become much thicker. Recruit shook his head helplessly. He had no choice but to turn around and beat him up. I can only speed up, trying to stay away from Karen. If you can't afford to offend me, can you still afford to hide? Seeing the recruit getting further and further away from him, Karen felt helpless. He could only find another target and find a recruit who was at the same pace as him to follow closely. Gradually, a strange thing happened on the campus. Whenever Karen shouted a slogan, the recruits next to him would speed up and move away from him in a tacit understanding. When everyone speeds up, the original normal speed becomes slow. So, everyone mustered up their energy and ran as hard as they could. After changing several people in a row, Karen once again met the recruit who followed him at the beginning. "Hey, what a coincidence, I meet you again," Karen said with a smile. Recruit turned his head desperately and accelerated again. Advertisement Karen seemed to have spotted him. He smiled, he chased him, he ran away, he couldn't escape. This guy is interesting. Zephyr also noticed Karen's strange behavior and nodded thoughtfully. Why is it interesting? Instructor, who was standing next to Zephyr, didn't know why. He also noticed Karen's behavior, but didn't find anything wrong. Zephyr lit a cigar, looked at Huo Xiaoshan, who was also thoughtful, and asked, "You can see it too, please tell me." Huo Xiaoshan nodded sheepishly and said slowly, "I have observed him for a long time and found that his shouting is not meaningless. Every time he shouts, his condition will recover a little." Zephyr nodded with satisfaction and said happily, "Yes, it is indeed the case." Could he be a devil fruit user? Instructor, standing next to Zephyr, speculated. In this sea, there are various devil fruits, and their users have all kinds of strange abilities. It's possible. I remember that there is a devil fruit in the Devil Fruit Illustrated book that does have such an effect. Huo Xiaoshan recalled, touching his beard. You were talking about the encouraged fruit. Zephyr also knew about devil fruit, and then he shook his head and denied. But it shouldn't be the encouraged fruit. I remember that this fruit has been eaten by others. He had seen the effect of the encouragement fruit. Although the encouragement fruit was paramecia, the effect it brought to the army was no less than lobia. Encouraging fruits can arouse the power hidden in people's hearts by waving flags and shouting, so that the inspired people will have a continuous flow of power. This power's blessing to the army is very terrifying. Probably not, if it is true. Zephyr shook his head and looked back at the school grounds. As time went by, some people began to be unable to hold on. When the first person shouted to give up, a string that was tight in everyone's hearts also loosened. This is often the case. When the people around you are persevering, you can persevere. But when the people around you choose to give up, you will feel that it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm not the first, so I'm not the worst. This is what many people think. Karen also thought about it, but he was unwilling to be eliminated like this. So he is still running and shouting, but his steps became heavier and heavier, and his shouts became quieter and quieter. He only felt that his throat was burning, and the scorching heat wave was like a knife cutting through his throat, making him unable to shout. The recruit in front of Karen could no longer hold on and chose to give up. Advertisement Rosinante, who was following Karen, was also feeling uncomfortable at this time, and his expression was not as relaxed as before. Even Smoker, who had been running in front, slowed down a lot. Tina was also dripping with sweat, breathing heavily, and her chest kept rising and falling. I persisted for who knows how long. Karen opened her mouth again, but no sound came out. Has she reached her limit? He staggered, his eyes went black, the world spun, and he fainted. When Karen opened his eyes again, he found himself on the bed in the medical room. He sat up with difficulty and looked around. The medical room is very large, but it seems very crowded at this time, because there are people everywhere, all of whom are unconscious. Like Karen, they are all people who fainted in the selection and are also losers. Some are already awake and some are still sleeping. In the end, it still failed. Alas, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I tried my best. I will definitely succeed next time. Karen sighed, put away his disappointed mood, and regained his fighting spirit. You're awake, please drink some water first. The nurse next to her handed over a glass of water and handed it to Karen's hand. Thank you. Thank you. A hoarse voice came from Karen's mouth. His throat was really tired, so he took the water glass and drank it in one gulp. How long have I been unconscious? Putting the water glass on the table, Karen showed the nurse a smile that was uglier than crying. It's only for one night. Don't worry, you'll be fine. We have a lot of experience. The little nurse said calmly, obviously very good at dealing with coma. Then can I leave now? Sure. Karen nodded, not wanting to stay any longer because the smell of the hospital was indeed unpleasant. Instead of staying here, it's better to go back to the dormitory. Fortunately, although he was sore all over, it was not to the point where he could not move. Etc. After taking a few steps, the nurse seemed to have thought of something and called out to Karen, who was about to leave. What's going on? Karen turned her head blankly and asked curiously. I forgot to tell you. In 3 days, you have to report to the elite training camp. Chapter 13. Passing the assessment advertisement. Karen didn't know how she left the medical bay. He was confused, excited, and a little overwhelmed. When he heard that he would sign up for the management selection camp 3 days later, he suddenly felt like crying. He did the same, rubbing his red eyes and looking at his slightly tired face in the mirror. It has been more than 2 weeks, and every time he sees a strange version of himself in the mirror, he still feels unreal. He frowned and stared in the mirror, pinched his cheek hard, and the slight pain made him realize that this was all true. At this time, he was standing naked in the bathroom of the dormitory, with cold water drops rolling down his body. Compared to how thin he was 2 weeks ago, he now has well-proportioned muscles and a sense of strength. The white and tender skin also turned into a healthy wheat color under the sunshine. Ha ha ha, I succeeded, I passed, and my efforts were not in vain. Karen couldn't control herself anymore, opened her mouth and laughed. People feel refreshed when happy events happen. At this moment, Karen's body is exhausted, but his mood is extremely exciting. After a simple wash, Karen cheered up and returned to the training ground regardless of his physical fatigue. Although his body is sore now, simple training can still be completed. Even if he passed, he didn't want to slack off. It was too difficult to pass this time, so he wanted to accumulate strength so that he could easily handle it in the next assessment. Elite Training Camp. General Instructor Office. At this time, Zephyr was holding a phone in one hand and talking about something, while Huo Xiaoshan sat next to him and looked through files from time to time. There were only 2 people in the room, and the sound of Zephy's exchanges and Huo Xiaoshan's flipping through files filled the room. 513 people, these are the candidates who passed the selection this year. Zephyr lit a cigar and said to Warring States, who was on the phone. Okay, I understand. Warring States didn't ask why so many people were selected this year. He believed in Zephy's choice. What he needed to do was increase the allocation of resources to the elite training camp. Click. Advertisement. The phone call bug was hung up by Zephyr. Teacher Zephyr, I really thought that only 300 people were selected for this selection. Huo Xiaoshan exhaled a puff of cigarette and said with emotion. Haha, how is that possible? They are all talented people with potential. Since they are talented, they will not be given up because of resource issues. When Zephyr talked about this, a hearty smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he said categorically. If Marine doesn't even have this resource, then there is no need for the elite training camp. So as long as you can persevere and don't give up easily, I agree. This test is nominally about physical fitness, but it actually tests perseverance and endurance. Fortunately, they did not disappoint me. Only less than 100 people were eliminated out of more than 600 people. After a moment of pause, the conversation changed. Do you know why there are so many elites this year? Zephyr glanced at Huoshao Mountain, intending to investigate. Huo Xiaoshan stopped browsing. Having some guesses in his mind, he said in a deep voice. Is it because of the nationwide military conscription? Zephyr blew out a cloud of snow-white smoke and explained. Yes, but the most fundamental reason is because of the Great Pirate Era. With the words One Piece Roger shouted before his death, Marine's many years of operation were ruined. In today's world, children all want to be pirates and no longer want to be Marines. In order to cope with this situation, Marine can only continue to recruit troops. This is also the reason why so many elites can be selected this year, but even if so many are selected, Marine is still far from enough for this ocean. Huo Xiaoshan stood aside respectfully, sighing in his heart, the age of great pirates, One Piece, what a terrifying guy. Zephyr put out the cigar in his hand and sighed. Speaking of which, although there are many elites this year, there are no geniuses like Sakaski, Perusalino, and Kuzan. Zephyr frowned and pressed his temples with both hands, feeling a little upset. The reason why the Great Pirate Age is called the Great Pirate Age is because in everyone's mind, being a pirate is more majestic than being a marine. Therefore, they prefer to be free pirates than restricted marines. They usually use the slogan of freedom, burn, kill, loot, and commit all kinds of evil. A series of horrific crimes, a series of heart-wrenching cries, and scenes full of desperate faces. Advertisement. In this evil era, there are killings and tragedies everywhere. Countless families were destroyed, and countless islands shed their blood in the flames of war. And what caused all this was just a sentence from One Piece. Do you want my treasure? If you want it, I can give it all to you. Go find it. I put all the treasures there. But is it really because of this sentence? Zephyr forced himself to wake up from his chaotic thoughts. He couldn't think too much, and he didn't dare to think too much. No matter what, he is Marine, and for him, cultivating excellent Marines is his mission. Future matters should still be left to young people to handle. Huo Xiaoshan looked through the file in his hand, pointed to Smoker's name, and suggested. Smoker may be a bit irritated, but his talent is the best among this class of recruits. Zephyr nodded in agreement and forced a smile on his lips. Smoker is not bad, but he is not the best. Huo Xiaoshan flipped through the files, compared them carefully, frowned slightly, raised his head and smiled bitterly. Teacher, please forgive my poor eyesight, but I haven't found anyone more talented than Smoker here. Before Zephyr could answer, he suddenly relaxed his brows and had a guess in his mind. He said in surprise. Could it be that you are talking about Kukulo Karen? Zephyr glanced at Huo Xiaoshan in surprise, nodded and said, Do you know him? Yes, his instructor at the recruiting training camp was me. He arrived here 2 weeks ago. At that time, he looked immature and had no training at all. I thought he wouldn't last long, but that day, I saw him training alone at noon, and I thought this little guy was interesting, so I chatted with him for a few words. I told him that he could sign up for the elite training camp in 3 days. I didn't expect him to pass at that time. I didn't expect. Huo Xiaoshan had a very good impression of Karen, and he always smiled when he mentioned that day. Yes, I passed the elite selection in just 2 weeks. Those who don't know how easy it is to think that the elite selection is. Zephyr sighed, thoughtfully. Alone. Should we train him alone? Huo Xiaoshan suggested. Zephyr was a little moved by this proposal. Thinking of Warring States speculation about Karen's background, he shook his head and spoke slowly. No, just let him train normally and let him develop some relationships with his comrades in the army. Chapter 14 Marine 6 Styles Advertisement 3 days passed quickly. During these 3 days, Karen conducted simple training on the school field almost every day. It has to be said that in this world where everyone has a monster physique, Karen's body aches disappeared after just one sleep. Today is the day to register for the elite training camp, and the school grounds are already filled with rows of heroic recruits. Each of them could not hide their excitement and chatted happily. As soon as Karen walked to the school grounds, Rosinante came over from nowhere. With an excited look on his face, he stretched out his fist and patted Karen on the shoulder. Congratulations. Karen nodded and gave Rosinante a bright smile. Tongshi, I thought I was eliminated. At the moment when he fainted, he really felt like he was eliminated. When the registration is over, I'll treat you to a big dinner. Haha, as promised, I want to eat more. Karen wanted to say something more, but saw that Zephyr had already led a group of instructors over, so he quickly shut up. Quiet. Huo Shaoshan stubbed out the cigar in his hand and roared. I'm very disappointed in you. What do you want to do with all the noise on the school field? The whole place was silent, and everyone looked at the instructor in front of them with burning eyes. Zephyr took a step forward, looked around everyone, and said in a deep voice. First of all, congratulations to everyone for passing the selection. From today on, you will be a member of the elite training camp. But don't be too happy. Since it is an elite training camp, it is naturally more stringent and cruel than the training camps you stayed in before. You have another chance to give up now. The more you cannot accept the training methods of the elite training camp, you can choose to leave now. If you choose to leave later, leaving will not just be an elite training camp. When Zephyr said this, he paused for a moment, looked at the unresponsive recruit, nodded with satisfaction, and then said. Very good. Since no one chooses to give up, it means you all agree. Karen rolled his eyes and complained in his mind. Just kidding, I finally passed, how could I choose to give up? Of course, I also know that you all think that you are the best among recruits. If I directly arrange your training tasks, you will inevitably be dissatisfied. So next, I will give you a chance to challenge Instructor. Karen once again couldn't help complaining in her heart. Why give a chance? Isn't it just to demonstrate? Advertisement, just kidding. Let us recruiters beat you up as a Marine general. Isn't this bullying? Sure enough, when Zephyr finished speaking, the originally silent recruits became restless and talked about it. Quiet, no discussion allowed. You must remember that you are soldiers, and a soldier's duty is to obey orders. No discussion is allowed without hearing the order from the commander. I am very disappointed in you. You are the worst class one have ever led. Looking at the recruits who were talking about it, Zephy's expression gradually became gloomy, and his body suddenly erupted with a chilling momentum, and he roared angrily. After discussing this with you, what do you think this place is? A vegetable market? If you have any opinions, call for a report. The chilling atmosphere made the recruits tremble, and all of them became silent and did not dare to speak. Of course I won't bully you. The instructor you want to challenge is the senior who graduated from the last class, Dominic. Come out. What you have to do is try to defeat him. Zephyr waved his hand, and a tall instructor wearing a marine cap came out. After giving Zephyr a military salute, the instructor named Dominic gave the recruit a silly smile. Zephyr nodded and continued, if any of you can defeat him, I can satisfy one of his needs. Karen's mind moved, would you like to satisfy a need? Seeing the unresponsive crowd, Zephyr held his forehead and smiled. Very good. Next, you can discuss freely. Those who are confident in their own strength can challenge him. As soon as Zephyr finished speaking, Smoker standing in front couldn't wait to yell. I'll do it. It's him, a monster with a power value of over 800. As soon as Smoker made a sound, he was recognized by some recruits. Smoker walked through the crowd, gearing up, and gave Dominic a ferocious smile. Bring it on. Dominic put away his silly smile, reached out and took off the cloak of justice behind him, walked slowly to Smoker, and made a gesture of invitation to Smoker. Smoker pushed hard with his feet, accelerated, and attacked Dominic. Bang! Dominic didn't dodge, and he took Smoker's powerful and heavy blow. Iron. Advertisement. Feeling the shock coming from his wrist, Smoker looked at Dominic in disbelief. Unexpectedly, his full blow could not even break through Dominic's defense. Unwilling to be reconciled, he punched again, and his fists turned into countless fist shadows like a heavy rain, covering Dominic. Bang 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 bang. Dominic is like a solid rock, motionless and unbreakable. How is that possible? That's Smoker. A freak who can exert more than 800 power, how come he can't even break through the defense? It's not that Smoker is weak, it's that his opponent is too strong. Is this the iron block in the 6th form of Marine? I heard that the iron block is the strongest defensive technique among the 6th form. After practicing it, the body will be as unshakable as steel, and even swords cannot break it. The discerning recruits have already recognized the moves Dominic used, and they all opened their eyes wide and exclaimed. Smoker stared at his fist in disbelief. Suddenly he noticed that Dominic showed an apologetic expression to him, and Smoker seemed to understand something. He quickly raised his hands to protect his head, Sure enough, as soon as Smoker raised his hands, Dominic, who was standing on the defensive, moved. Dominic's left foot suddenly exerted force, and a thick thigh whipped towards Smoker like a whip. Smoker's body was like a kite with its string broken, flying fiercely into the sky. Before he could adjust his body in the air, a light blue slash rolled up the vacuum and continued to expand in Smoker's pupils. Lanjiao. Bang bang bang. Something was wrong. Smoker looked down at his body. The slash was powerful, but he felt nothing when it landed on him. Have you been released? Just as he was about to say something, Dominic flew up and caught the falling Smoker in an instant. It's moonwalk. Standing steadily on the ground, Smoker looked at Dominic's smiling face, feeling uncontrollably angry in his heart. Why show mercy? Dominic was stunned, touched the back of his head in embarrassment, and said in a low voice. It's just a test, isn't it? Chapter 15 Knife and Sword. Advertisement. Of course Smoker knew that this was just a test, but he still couldn't accept that he was let out. His pride did not allow him to do so. I haven't lost yet. So, Smoker raised his hand and asked Zephyr. Can I use weapons? Zephyr had been watching with cold eyes. Seeing that Smoker was not determined to give up, he pointed to the weapon rack next to him and said in a deep voice. Okay, there are weapons over there, you can choose whatever you want. Smoker walked slowly to the weapons rack next to him, pulled out an iron rod, felt the weight of it, and shouted to Dominic. You can choose one too. Dominic shook his head and rejected Smoker's kindness. I don't use weapons. Smoker nodded and said, I was careless just now. Now I'm picking up the weapon. I hope you won't show mercy. Although I know it's impossible to win, I still want to see the gap between me and the strong one. Dominic looked at Zephyr in embarrassment. Smoker noticed Dominic's actions and looked at Zephyr. Zephyr was silent for a moment, then nodded to Dominic, indicating that he didn't have to hold back. Dominic nodded and said to Smoker, Okay, I won't hold back next time. Smoker no longer hesitated. A speed appeared in front of Dominic's eyes. He raised the iron rod high with both hands and smashed it down with all his strength. Iron. Dominic remained motionless and took the blow forcefully, but now he was not as relaxed as before, and his body even took half a step back. It works. Smoker's eyes lit up, and he waved the iron rod to launch a new round of attacks. Only this time, Dominic did not choose to take a hard hit. His body was like a piece of paper, easily dodging Smoker's attack. It's paper painting. Smoker looked stunned. The difference in strength was huge. In just this moment, Dominic seized the opportunity and his body suddenly disappeared and appeared behind Smoker. Shave. Point the gun. Fight randomly. The speed was so fast that Smoker had no time to defend himself in time, and he felt as if he had been hit by countless bullets in his back. The severe pain made him spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. For a moment, he was spinning and fainted. Is this Marine 6 style? Karen's eyes were unblinking, her heart was burning, and she stared at all of Dominic's movements. This is Marine 6. Rosinante explained to Karen. I heard that these are 6 techniques compiled by Marines in the past generations in battle, and only Marine generals can learn them. Karen asked. Advertisement, we should be able to learn it too. Rosinante nodded and then said, of course, but not every skill can be learned. How many moves you can learn depends on your talent. Then this senior is really a genius, he has learned all the 6 moves. Karen looked at Dominic and sighed. Rosinante also looked at Dominic, thoughtfully, and guessed. Haha, I think Teacher Zephyr did it on purpose. He specifically chose Colonel Dominic to demonstrate the 6-style technique to us. After Smoker passed out, several recruits who thought they were good stood up and challenged Dominic one after another. But not surprisingly, they all failed. Of course, they didn't insist on beating Dominic to death like Smoker did. Rosinante and Tina also fought against Dominic, but retreated when they saw that there was no hope of victory. Don't you go and try? Rosinante asked. Tina didn't know why, but she also came to Karen with Rosinante. She looked at Karen curiously. Karen nodded, walked slowly towards Dominic, and said in a deep voice, does it mean that as long as one party can't move, it will win? Dominic was stunned and glanced at Smoker lying on the stretcher. Can't move? Another brat who is not afraid of death? He opened his mouth and was about to give advice, just to confirm his inner guess, when he heard Karen's voice. I want to choose a weapon. Sure enough, like Smoker, he also chose to use weapons. Can. Before Dominic could answer, Zephyr suddenly spoke up. Everyone was speechless for a while. Since Smoker fainted, although he had hit several people, they all tacitly agreed not to use weapons. Who is he? We have to choose a weapon again. Do we have to do like Smoker and let Dominic Instructor use all his strength? Didn't you hear what he said? If one party can't move, it will win. He couldn't be talking about the Instructor. I remember he was Karen who confessed his love to Tina. His power level is not high. You little brat who overestimates your abilities, do you want to show off and attract Teacher Zepha's attention? Some people marveled at Karen's courage, while others were dismissive of Karen. Karen walked to the weapon rack, randomly selected a suitable weapon, and smiled at Dominic. Instructor, I may offend you later, I hope you won't be angry. Dominic touched the back of his head and said confidently, it doesn't matter, as long as you can defeat me, I don't care what method you use. Karen closed her eyes, sighed in her heart, and murmured. Although you will find it incredible what happens next, there is nothing you can do about it. My mind goes back to passing the first assessment and returning to the dormitory. Ding. Congratulations to host for getting a 100% chance of being caught empty-handed. 100% chance of being caught with bare hands. Use sword weapons with both hands. Look at a person. Shout. Look at the sword. And 100% chance of being caught by the opponent. Opening his eyes, Karen said slowly, "You're showing off your shame." He shouted, "Dominic, look at the sword." Advertisement. Ever since Dominic heard Karen's vow, he had been wary of Karen's methods. He heard Karen shouting, "Look at the sword," and glanced over unconsciously. Too bad. Fooled. Can't watch. As soon as he glanced over, this idea appeared in his mind. Although he didn't know why he couldn't look, years of combat experience had been warning him. Iron. With his thoughts at this point, he quickly stepped back, made sure to keep a distance, and quickly used the iron block. Anticipate the possible encounters to come. No? Nothing happened. All the soldiers present stared blankly at Karen, who was wielding his sword, and Dominic, who was constantly retreating. What happened? Karen waved the long sword in his hand and was a little at a loss. Has the system failed? Why didn't it succeed? Dominic, look at the sword. Karen, who was unwilling to give up, waved the sword in his hand randomly and shouted again, "Look at the sword," but nothing happened. Could it be that the steps are wrong? Karen looked at the slightly curved single-edged sword in his hand and had a bold guess in his mind. TMD. I have been tricked by this world. In Karen's world, there is a clear difference between a knife and a sword. The simplest distinction is, the knife is single-edged. The sword is double-edged. Karen looked at Dominic, who was facing a formidable enemy, and smiled awkwardly. What, can you change my sword for me? Zephyr was also confused. When he heard Karen's request, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly and he coughed lightly. Ahem. What weapon do you want to change? Dominic was sure that nothing happened, so he didn't feel embarrassed at all. He put away the iron block and stood up straight again. Karen put the knife in his hand on the weapon rack and picked it up again. No. There was no double-edged sword that Karen wanted on the weapons rack. The only double-edged sword was a Western sword. In order to prevent the embarrassing incident from happening again, Karen did not choose this Western sword. Instead, he explained to Zephyr in detail what he wanted the sword to look like. After hearing Karen's description, an instructor standing behind Zephyr pulled out the sword in his hand and handed it to Karen. Karen's eyes lit up, and she took the double-edged sword with great determination. Said to Zephyr and Dominic, "Okay, I'm ready." Chapter 16. Watching the sword. Advertisement. Hold your breath and concentrate. Look at the sword. Karen shouted loudly and swung the sword downwards in his hand. At this moment, he seemed to be possessed by Li Jing. Hearing this familiar sentence, Dominic felt angry. At this moment, no matter how good-tempered he was, he couldn't bear Karen teasing him like this. I immediately made up my mind to teach him a lesson. Thinking this, Dominic subconsciously looked at the sword in Karen's hand. The next second, his eyes blurred, and Dominic realized something was wrong. In his sight, he suddenly found that Karen had become very tall. He could only see Karen's appearance clearly by raising his head. That's not right. I am obviously far away from him. Why am I so close to him now? This is what Dominic was thinking at this time. Wow, Instructor is so strong and fast. I didn't even see anything, and Instructor took the weapon from Karen's hand. Indeed, Instructor's speed is too fast. Is this Marine 6 style shaving? But why did Instructor take Karen's sword like this? It feels so shameful. What? What are they talking about? When did I take Cullen's sword? Dominic's mind was full of doubts, and he subconsciously wanted to scratch the back of his head with his hands. But he found that he couldn't move his hands at all. When he looked closely, he was holding a long sword with his hands clasped together. Only then did he realize that he was abnormal. At this time, he was kneeling on one knee in front of Karen, holding the blade of the sword with his hands raised. Who I am? Where am I? Why should I take Karen's sword? And still in such a shameful way. Why can't I move? At this moment, he suddenly remembered Karen's words before the duel. Does it mean that as long as one party cannot move, it will win? Instructor, I may offend you later. I hope you won't be angry. Isn't it true that I can't move like Karen said? Offended? Is this what Karen meant by offended? Advertisement. Dominic raised his head blankly and said at a loss. You, what did you do to me? Then, he thought of something and affirmed. Are you a devil fruit user? Karen neither denied nor affirmed, just smiled sheepishly at Dominic. Now that he has used it, he doesn't want to hide it. After all, there are always some powerful and unexplainable abilities in this sea. Since he was recognized as a devil fruit user, he naturally wouldn't clarify anything. He turned his attention to Zephyr, who was standing aside to watch the battle, and slowly said, Does this count as me winning? Zephyr was also a little stunned at this time. He could see clearly. From his perspective, Karen just made a simple downward slashing action. Dominic just glanced at Karen and suddenly appeared in front of Karen. As if he had practiced it countless times, he naturally knelt down in front of Karen and took Karen's sword in a funny way. The speed was so fast that even he himself didn't see clearly that this was definitely not shaving. Dominic is definitely not voluntary. Is this a devil fruit ability? In his understanding, the devil fruit's abilities are indeed 8 gates. Compared with Karen's ability to just make people kneel down to pick up the sword, it is even weirder and more terrifying. He has also seen it. But they usually have restrictions. Even the weirdest paramecia has rules to follow, such as the simplest touch. But like Karen, it's just a word, an action. What devil fruit is this? So scary. What nonsense are you talking about? Even if you win, your weapon is clamped. What do you win? That's right. Nonsense, instructor, stand up and teach him a lesson. Before Zephyr said anything, the recruits next to him started talking about it. After all, in their field of vision, Cullen's weapons were taken away, and the advantage was with Instructor. The corners of Dominic's mouth twitched slightly. I want to stand up, but the problem is that except for my mouth, I can't control other organs in my body at all. Do you want me to bite him to death? Zephyr came back to his senses, stretched out his hand to suppress the chattering recruit, and said slowly. Dominic, can you move? Ever since Dominic discovered his situation, he had tried to move his body, but until Zephyr asked, he failed. So, he closed his eyes and said bitterly, I lost. Advertisement instantly, there was an uproar. What did Instructor say? Why did Instructor admit defeat? HMPH, this Karen is really not simple, he should be a devil fruit user. Does anyone know what devil fruit this is? It's too powerful? If you rely on devil fruit, even if you win, it will still be a weak victory. Some people questioned why Instructor gave up, some marveled at the power of devil fruit, and some were dismissive of devil fruit. Zephyr said nothing and nodded to Karen, indicating that Karen had won. With a smile on his face, Karen put away the sword in his hand, stretched out his hand and pulled Dominic up, who was stunned in place. I used my ability. If it were a head-on duel, I would never be your opponent. Dominic was not angry, as if to prevent Karen from disapproving of the means to defeat him, Dominic advised. If you lose, you lose. There is no pros and cons. I'm already a dead man on the battlefield. Don't think that using your abilities doesn't count as winning or being upright. On the battlefield, victory is everything. Yes, on the battlefield, failure means death, and no one cares how you win. That's right. Victory is victory, defeat is defeat. You are a fool if you don't try your best on the battlefield. Zephyr didn't know when he came to Karen and Dominic, lit a cigar, and said slowly. Teacher Zephyr. Teacher Zephyr. Karen and Dominic lowered their heads in respect. Zephyr blew out a puff of snow-white smoke and patted Dominic on the shoulder. But losing this time is really not your problem, you have done a good job. Then he looked Karen up and down and said, as for you, you're pretty good. Karen blushed and waved his hand. Lucky. HMPH, it's really lucky that I didn't even bring a weapon to the battlefield. Zephy's face darkened, referring to Karen's move of changing weapons on the spot. Karen smiled awkwardly, feeling a little helpless. After all, this was the first time that he was 100% free-handed. How could he know that the requirements for weapons were so strict? Speaking of which, we should also blame this deformed world. It seems that in this world, as long as it has an edge, any weapon can be called a sword. In the original plot, Karen felt embarrassed when she saw Zoro holding 3 swords and saying that he wanted to become the best swordsman in the world. After all, in the eyes of Chinese people, a sword can never be a sword. Seeing what Zephyr was about to say, Karen changed the subject and said with a smile. Since I won, can I make a request? Chapter 17 Devil Fruit. Advertisement. Zephyr did not answer, but asked Karen a question. Are you a devil fruit user? This time Karen didn't pretend to be stupid. He had to admit it, otherwise he couldn't explain the scene that just happened. Since he was thought to have eaten a devil fruit, it was just a cover for his abilities. He nodded quickly. Yes. Zephyr took a puff of his cigar and asked. What fruit? It's the paramecia fruit, the fruit of speech, the devil fruit related to language. This is the answer that Karen has long thought about. Since getting the system, the abilities he has acquired are more or less related to language. There are so many different kinds of devil fruits that there won't be any flaws if you just make one up. Sure enough, Zephyr didn't have the slightest doubt. So when you were testing the power level, you shouted out the divine avoidance and the second round slogan was all to coordinate with the devil fruit? Zephyr was very smart and immediately understood Karen's previous strange behavior. Yes, after all, I have only joined Marine for more than 2 weeks. Without the devil fruit, I would not be able to pass the exam. Karen nodded, a little disappointed in his tone. Zephyr laughed dumbly and said. You brat, are you showing off to me? Karen was startled and said in astonishment. What? Zephyr glanced at the motionless Dominic and asked. What was your power level when you tested it? Dominic touched the back of his head and said with an honest smile. 698. How long have you been practicing? It takes about 13 years from childhood to adulthood. Dominic replied honestly. Karen's heart moved. Of course, the Taoist power value of 698 is very high, but after 13 years of training? After all, in Karen's mind, all the people in this world have monster physiques. Not to mention the protagonist, there's Kirby, who had mixed up with the protagonist in the early stage. After only a few months of training, he not only learned to shave, but also injured the protagonist. There are no geniuses in this world, there are only cheats. But now that he has focused his attention on Dominic, who is a Marine general, it seems that his talent is pretty good. Looking at the thoughtful Karen, Zephyr grinned. Understood, don't belittle yourself, your potential is terrifying. Karen touched her head sheepishly and asked tentatively. Advertisement, then can I make a request? He has not forgotten the reason why he stood up to challenge Dominic. Zephyr couldn't help but punch Karen. Kid, are you kidding me? Since I said I can make demands after winning, of course I won't break my promise. Karen received a hard punch and touched his sore shoulder, almost groaning. Envy. It must be jealousy. If you have any requests, mention them quickly, and you'll save yourself talking about them every day. Zephyr put away his fists and asked curiously, I want to learn to give life back. Karen spoke quickly, fearing that Zephyr would punch him again. Where did you hear about the return of life? From a soldier's mouth. I heard that life return can store energy into the body, and then when you want to use it, you can consume the energy to restore your vitality. Karen didn't think about hiding anything and said honestly. I want to learn how to return life, and then I won't be afraid of losing strength when training, and I can keep training. Zephyr frowned. Life return can indeed be done like this, but it requires practice from a young age. You are right, life restitution can indeed be achieved to this extent, but it takes a long time to learn, and the life reversion that ordinary people learn can only control the organs of the body. Except for some special people, the practicality of life restoration is far less than that of Marine 6th form. Zephyr remembers that the one who practiced life restitution better is the current Marine Lieutenant General Ghost Spider. He can use his hair as hands and can use 8 knives under his control. Thinking of the incredible scene that just happened, he looked at Karen suspiciously. Could it be that he also wanted to use more swords like the Ghost Spider? I can give you the skills of practicing life return, but I don't think you can succeed. Because if you want to practice to the level you mentioned, you can only succeed if you practice from a young age, so I advise you not to waste too much energy on returning life. How about it? Do you want to make another request? Karen didn't speak, but looked at Zephyr with burning eyes. The look in his eyes made it clear that he would not give up. Zephyr's mouth twitched slightly, he patted his forehead and said angrily. No matter what I do, I can't teach you now. When the training is over, you come to my office. Okay, thank you Teacher Zephyr. Karen finally let go of her hanging heart and said happily. Zephyr said angrily. What are you doing here? Get out of there. Advertisement. The training is still going on, and the episode just now did not affect the recruit's enthusiasm for playing against the instructor. Karen returned the borrowed sword to Instructor and said thank you. Returning to the previous place honestly, there were all kinds of strange looks around. He's really famous among recruits now. After all, he is the only recruit to defeat Instructor. Are you a devil fruit user? Rosinante asked curiously. Therefore, Karen re-explained Zephyr's explanation to Rosinante and Tina. What good luck. Rosinante looked at Karen enviously. I never thought someone like you could eat devil fruit. Tina mocked. Karen rolled his eyes and couldn't help but said. What kind of person am I? Also, I remember that your position is not here, right? You shameless person. As for why Tina is here, Tina can be wherever she wants, do you care? Karen laughed dumbly, showing her white teeth and didn't say much. Hey, let me ask, why are you two so at odds with each other? Rosinante clicked his tongue and teased with interest. What young couple? What did you say? Tina screamed like a cat whose tail was stepped on. Hey, who doesn't know that brother Karen confessed his love to you in public? Now that you are here, haven't you agreed to Karen's confession? Rosinante analyzed it calmly with a look on his face that said, don't try to lie to me. Karen shook her head helplessly. Tina's cheeks turned slightly red and hesitantly said. Yes, he confessed his love, but Tina didn't agree. Rosinante looked like you believe it or not, and did not refute, but sighed to Karen. You guys are really famous now, you can actually defeat Instructor. It was just a fluke. Karen smiled modestly, and with a thought, he opened the system interface in his mind. 4,936 10,000s. Recruiting elite with great reputation. In the past few days, the reputation value has reached 4,936, which is still far away from the 10,000 mark, but he believes that after today, his reputation will skyrocket. Reputation needs fermentation. There are too few soldiers here. Chapter 18 Get. Advertisement night. Marine Headquarters, Marine Fenduo. General Instructor Office. Zephyr was sitting at the desk, holding a pen in his hand, sometimes frowning at a file, and sometimes showing a meaningless smile. Dong dong dong. A knock on the door pulled Zephyr out of his thoughts. Zephyr shook his head, put the file in his hand into the file bag, and said in a deep voice. Enter. The person who came was none other than Karen. After Karen defeated the instructor, the recruits all challenged the instructor like chicken blood, and this lasted until the evening. Karen had a simple dinner and went straight to Zephyr's office without stopping. He couldn't wait any longer for the return of his life. I can't tell you are still impatient. Seeing the identity of the visitor, Zephyr joked, then pointed to the empty chair opposite him and said casually. Sit. Karen was not polite, walked over to Zephyr and sat down. Looking at the teapot and empty cups on the table, he directly picked up the teapot and poured a glass of water for himself and Zephyr. Like an ox chewing a peony, he drinks it all in one gulp without tasting it. Zephyr watched Karen's actions with interest, and was not angry. Instead, he took out a cigar from the desk and handed it to Karen. "You're welcome. Do you want to smoke?" Looking at the cigar that was handed to him, he felt a little hesitant. He smoked before time travel, but rarely smoked cigars. He has never smoked in this life, and he himself is a little hesitant whether to smoke or not. After all, smoking is harmful to health. But then I thought about it, in this world, are we still afraid of this? In Marine, not to mention Zephyr and Ghost Spider, even Smoker and Tina are all smokers. Is there anyone in Marine who doesn't smoke? Grinning, he took the cigar, lit it, and after just a slight puff, Karen felt a choking feeling in his throat. Cough cough cough. He quickly put out the cigar in his hand and drank some water to relieve the nausea in his throat. Ha ha ha, kid, it turns out you've never smoked. Seeing this scene, Zephyr burst into tears of laughter. Karen glared at Zephyr resentfully and got straight to the point. I'm here to learn how to return life. Zephyr slowly stopped smiling and said seriously. Advertisement, are you sure you want to learn this one instead of changing to another one? Karen nodded solemnly. Okay, this is the practice technique of returning life. You can take it. If you don't understand, let me know. But if you really can learn it, don't waste too much time on it. After all, you have passed the best time to learn and return life. Zephyr had no choice but to take out a booklet from the desk, which clearly stated the life return exercise book. It was obviously ready. Karen took the pamphlet, placed it solemnly in his arms, and said thank you to Zephyr. With the manual in hand, Karen didn't want to stay any longer and just wanted to go back and try to learn. As soon as he stood up to say goodbye, he was stopped by Zephyr. Wait, why are you in such a hurry? Karen had no choice but to sit down again and give Zephyr a questioning look. Zephyr squinted his eyes and carefully examined the young man in front of him, and asked tentatively. Do you know Meng Chi Di Dorag? Although Warring States had already analyzed Karen's identity, he still wanted to ask. Karen was not surprised at all when he heard this question. After all, he had never thought of hiding his identity. Just because you haven't been discovered in the recruiting training camp before doesn't mean you won't be discovered in the elite training camp. Karen nodded, not denying it. Yes, I was able to enter Marine headquarters because he gave me a letter. Do you know his identity? I know. In fact, I only found out after joining Marine. The lack of denial does not mean that Karen will tell the truth. Really? What do you think of the Revolutionary Army in Dorag? Zephyr stared at Karen and asked curiously. Karen did not answer in a hurry, but slowly lowered his head and fell into deep thought. He was thinking about how to answer Zephyr. From Marine's side, there is no doubt that the Revolutionary Army is the cancer of the world, and Dorag is the leader of this cancer. But from his own standpoint, Dorag not only saved his life but also recommended him to Marine, which is undoubtedly his benefactor. Karen raised his head and said slowly, I don't know, but I know I'm a Marine. Instead of thinking about how to answer, it is better not to answer and just state your position. Zephyr was stunned for a moment, not expecting Karen to give him such an answer. What a cunning boy. But he was right, no matter what, he was Marine now. Advertisement. Zephyr spit out a snow-white cigarette and said with emotion. Yes, you are Marine, and that is enough for me, Zephy's student. Seeing that Zephyr didn't speak for a long time, Karen stood up silently and walked towards the door. Just as he touched the doorknob, he heard Zephyr shout again. Wait, there is one more thing. Can Lao Deng finish what he said in one go? Is there anything left to finish? Karen shook her head helplessly and complained in her heart. Turning around, he asked confusedly, What? Zephyr put out the cigarette in his hand and said. You'll go to the Munitions department later. Ministry of Munitions? Karen was a little confused. Isn't your weapon very special? Go to the Munitions department. There are many kinds of weapons in there. You can choose one. Zephyr pressed his temples, stood up, turned to Karen and said. Of course, the weapons inside are not famous swords, but it is not difficult to find a weapon that meets your needs. Karen really didn't expect that Zephyr would consider this matter for himself, and said without hesitation. Okay, I'll be there in a moment. Zephyr rolled his eyes at Karen, pulled out an envelope with a seal from the table, and said angrily. Will you go there in a moment? Are you familiar with the munitions department? See if they let you choose weapons when you go there. Go on. Thank you, teacher. Karen smiled awkwardly and took the envelope from Zephyr with both hands. This time, he didn't leave in a hurry, but just looked at Zephyr silently. Zephyr looked at Karen standing there and said doubtfully. What are you doing? Why don't you leave? Do you still want me to accompany you? Why? Don't you know it yourself? Aren't I afraid that you might have forgotten to explain something else? Karen complained in her heart, but remained calm on the surface and said with a smile. No, I was wondering if you have anything else to explain? Zephyr touched the back of his head. Karen blinked and couldn't help but ask again. Are you sure there's nothing else? Zephy's face froze. He finally understood. It turned out that this little guy thought he was senile and couldn't help but cursed angrily. No more. Get out of here. Karen quickly turned around, grabbed the door handle, and rushed out at lightning speed while not forgetting to shout. Okay. Chapter 19 Battle Against Smoker Advertisement. After leaving Zephy's office, Karen did not rush back to the dormitory to learn about life return. Instead, she asked an instructor for directions and walked to the munitions department. After all, he didn't know how long the envelope Zephyr gave him was valid. Since you can get a weapon for free, hurry up. The munitions department is not difficult to find. He is right next to the general training ground. The process of selecting the weapon went very smoothly. He didn't know much about swordsmanship, and there was nothing wrong with it. As long as it looked sturdy, it was a sword. Karen has always longed for swords deep down in her heart. Who hasn't fantasized about a person, a sword, a horse, and a bottle of wine when he was a child? As I grew older, I was surrounded by swords, and I fantasized about flying with a sword like Li Xiaoyao and slaying demons in the world. Chinese people have always had a complex about swords. I took out a handful at random and it looked quite pleasing to the eye. There was a choking sound, a cold light flashed, and the sword was unsheathed. Karen imitated the masters who appeared in TV dramas when she was a child, holding a sword flower on her arm, standing with her hands behind her back, and said calmly, "Good sword, good sword." At this moment, he just felt that he was so handsome. "Hey kid, have you made your choice? We're going to close." A sharp urging interrupted Karen's reverie. He quickly put the sword in his hand into the scabbard and shouted anxiously, Okay. Back in the dormitory, Karen carefully took out the life from his arms and returned it to read carefully. As Zephyr said, life restoration is indeed very difficult to achieve. He not only needs high talent, but also needs to be cultivated from an early age. In the next few days, in addition to training at the elite training school every day, Karen spent his free time practicing with a booklet. Are you Karen? The guy who defeated the recruit instructor? Just after the training, Karen was practicing with a book in her arms when a disdainful voice came into her ears. Karen raised his head and found a short-haired man holding a mace and holding a cigar standing in front of him. His eyes were fierce and his face was full of disdain. It's Smoker. Karen recognized the person immediately. I'm not, you got the wrong person, Karen replied casually. Smoker looked at Karen in surprise. Oh, I got the wrong person. Do you know Karen? Karen didn't even look back. I don't know, advertisement. After getting rid of Smoker, Karen focused her body and mind on the booklet again. Not long after, Smoker appeared next to Karen again and slammed the mace in his hand to the ground. The sound of pong stirred up bursts of dust. You are obviously Karen, why did you lie to me? As he said that, he took out a photo with Karen from somewhere, pointed at Karen and shouted angrily. Karen looked at Smoker funny and pretended to be stupid. I'm not Karen, I just look a little like him. Smoker looked Karen up and down and said suspiciously. Are you really not? No, Karen vowed. He has no time to fool around with Smoker now, he just wants to learn how to return life quickly. I thought I could get rid of Smoker this time, but I didn't expect Smoker to come back to his senses this time. I don't care, if you don't, just take me to find him. Karen put away the brochure and said helplessly, what are you looking for him for? Smoker picked up the mace on the ground and put it on his shoulder and said without hesitation. I heard he defeated Instructor, which I didn't even do. In this training camp, I don't allow anyone who is so NB. Hearing such a silly line, Karen almost burst into laughter. Okay, I'm Karen, what are you going to do? Smoker waved the mace in his hand and shouted at the top of his lungs. I knew you were Karen. Come and fight me, I want to duel with you. No fighting. Why? In no mood, are you scared? Yes. Looking at the helpless Karen, Smoker scratched his head with a headache. Although he looked vicious, he was not a bully. How do you want to fight me? I am no match for you without my abilities, so there is no need to fight. I will admit defeat. This is true. If Karen doesn't use his abilities, he is indeed no match for Smoker. After hearing this, Smoker's eyes lit up. I know you are a devil fruit user, and of course I will not limit your methods. Come on, I haven't fought against anyone with the ability yet. Advertisement Karen still didn't agree. He actually wanted to fight Smoker. After all, Smoker was a Marine who fought Luffy in the plot, although he acted very awkward in the later stage. Fighting against Smoker is undoubtedly a good opportunity to judge his own strength, but not now. He has self-awareness. Now he doesn't have any ability, so he is no match for Smoker. He wanted to wait until he learned to return his life before having a fair fight with Smoker. Well, let me make a bet with you. If I win, you don't have to do anything. If you win, I will do one thing for you. Seeing Karen who was interested, Smoker quickly suggested that he just wanted to have a fight with Karen. Karen sighed and shook her head. You still don't want to? Smoker gritted his teeth and turned around with a look of disappointment on his face. Although he wanted to fight Karen, he would never force him to do so. Wait, I agree. Karen called to Smoker, who turned around and continued. I can fight you, but the bet is not right. Whatever bet you want, just ask. Smoker turned around in surprise. Whether you win or I win, I hope you won't be angry after it's over. Karen suggested that since Smoker didn't force him, he wouldn't take advantage of Smoker either. After all, in his heart, he would win. Good. Smoker spit out the cigar in his mouth and impatiently attacked Karen. Let's do it. Karen unsheathed his sword and signaled Smoker to attack. Smoker no longer hesitated, raised the mace, exerted force on his legs suddenly, accelerated, and rushed over like a cannonball. Smoker was very fast. When he rushed to Karen's side, his mace was less than 1 meter away from Karen's body. "Look at the sword!" Karen shouted loudly, and the Yuanhong suddenly fell from his hand. Yuanhong is the name Karen gave his sword. It was the sword in the hands of a swordsman he liked very much in his previous life. Smoker knew that Cullen had defeated Instructor and did not hold back from the blow. But I didn't expect Karen to be so stupid. He didn't dodge or block, he just waved around like a child. There was some regret in his heart. If he had known better, he would not have used weapons. Now it was his full blow, and there was no chance to stop midway. It's better now. Unless he knows how to use iron blocks, he will have to stay in bed for several months if he survives this blow. I haven't put away the panic in my heart yet. The next second, Smoker felt his eyes blur. The accelerating body suddenly stopped. Who is it? Great, someone stopped me. Before he could figure out what was happening, Smoker heard Karen's faint voice. You lost. Chapter 20 Confident Zephyr advertisement. Who loses? Me. Only then did Smoker realize that his posture was very wrong, and he realized what stupid thing he had just done. The moment Karen's sword was swung down, he uncontrollably dropped the weapon in his hand, knelt down on one knee, raised his hands high, and clipped the edge of Karen's sword. What am I doing? Why did I catch Karen's sword edge? At this moment, Smoker was as puzzled as Dominic at that time. Smoker raised his head with difficulty, with a look of disbelief on his face. He struggled desperately, but couldn't move. Looking at the face so close, Smoker asked tremblingly. Is this what you are capable of? Karen didn't answer, put away Yuanhong, and lifted up Smoker who was kneeling on the ground. I said, if I use my power, you can't win. Smoker stood up, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and said in frustration. I lost. Karen patted him on the shoulder and comforted. It's not your fault. Devil fruit powers are hard to guard against. In terms of physical fitness, I'm not as good as you. After a while, I won't use my powers to fight you. Smoker shook his head in despair and nodded again. This child received a huge blow. He thought he was the best among the elites, but unexpectedly, Karen easily defeated him without even moving. Then what's the point of our training? Anyway, as long as you eat the devil fruit, no matter how hard you train, you won't be able to match your abilities. Smoker seemed to be asking Karen, but also seemed to be asking himself. Pung. After hearing this, Karen, who was about to leave, couldn't help but turn around and punch Smoker hard. The reason why you can't beat me is not because I ate the devil fruit, but because you are not strong enough. At this period, Smoker did not have the mentality and vision for plot. Karen didn't want to soften Smoker's mentality through this incident. If Zephyr knew about it, he would definitely teach him a lesson. Have you ever seen Mr. Zephyr and Lieutenant General Garp use devil fruits? Aren't they also very powerful? Look how many people who eat devil fruit can act arrogant in front of them. You can't beat me just because you're not strong enough and don't know how to be domineering. Advertisement. Karen didn't know if his 100% ability to deal with someone who could use hockey would be ineffective if he was caught with bare hands. But hockey can indeed restrain devil fruit users. Ha ha ha, this kid is right. You can't beat him because you are not strong enough. Zephy's voice suddenly came from afar. He didn't know where he had been observing for a long time. It wasn't until I heard Smoker say that the training was useless that I couldn't help but walk towards Karen and Smoker. As soon as I came over, I heard Karen's voice comforting Smoker. This kid is not bad, he is worthy of being the seeded player this year. Zephyr approved of Karen deep in his heart. Teacher Zephyr. Teacher Zephyr. Karen has long discovered that Zephyr has been secretly observing here, and he is not surprised to see Zephyr coming. Smoker's dejected look made Zephyr frown and look around. He was not the only one observing the duel between Karen and Smoker. Many recruits not far away were watching silently. Even some recruits looked at Karen with eyes filled with envy and disappointment. Zephyr knew what they were thinking. It was just that, like Smoker, they felt that those with devil fruit abilities were invincible. This is not okay, he will not allow this to happen. He shook his head and glared at Karen, but did not comfort Smoker. Gather. Zephyr roared angrily and gathered all the recruits. What's going on? Isn't it time for rest now? Rosinante stood up reluctantly and walked to Karen. Karen shook her head helplessly, feeling something bad in her heart. Soon, all the recruits had gathered. Although they had questions in their hearts, they didn't dare to ask. Karen, Smoker is out. Sure enough, as soon as the gathering was completed, Zephyr called Karen up as a model. There was no other way. Karen walked forward unhurriedly. I believe you have known for many days that Karen is a devil fruit user. On the first day of training, he defeated Dominic Instructor with devil fruit. As you saw just now, he defeated Smoker with the same move. Do you feel in your hearts that devil fruit is too powerful and impossible to defeat? The recruits looked at each other and said nothing, but the expressions on their faces gave Zephyr an answer. That's exactly what they think. Zephyr turned to look at Karen and asked, do you think so too? You feel that you are invincible and that no one can beat you? Advertisement. Karen quickly shook his head. No, there are people outside the world, and there is a world outside the world. There must be a way to restrain devil fruits in this world. Yes, I believe many people know that people who take devil fruit are disgusted by the sea. Without exception, they are very afraid of seawater, but we cannot attack them with seawater. Then do we have no other means of restricting them? Wrong. Not only do we have the sea tower stone, but we can also defeat them if we are strong enough. That's the domineering I will teach you later. If you want to learn domineering, your physical fitness must be very strong. This is the meaning of our training. Zephyr asked and answered questions and briefly introduced the weaknesses of the devil fruit. Domineering? Smoker raised his head, his eyes shining again. Zephyr didn't explain what domineering was. Instead of explaining it, it would be better to tell them directly with practical actions. He looked at Karen maliciously, with a smile on his face. He had long wanted to beat Karen, but he was afraid that Karen would think he was too proud after eating a devil fruit. Although Karen's answer just now proves that he is still very humble, but who knows whether he thinks so in his heart. The corner of Karen's mouth twitched, although she had already guessed in her mind. But I beat Zephyr? He looked at Zephyr warily and backed away calmly. Stop, no matter how much you say, let's just demonstrate it. I'll have a fight with Karen and let you see, devil fruit is nothing more than that. Without giving Karen a chance to refuse, Zephyr directly stopped Karen and showed a sinister smile. This is not good, you are my teacher, how can I attack you? Karen really doesn't want to fight Zephyr. Zephyr is right. Hockey can indeed restrain devil fruit. But is it a devil fruit to be caught with bare hands 100% of the time? Thinking of Zephyr kneeling in front of him in full view. Why are you looking forward to it? Shaking his head, being called the man who trained all Marines was not just talk. Thinking of the impact of this incident, Karen couldn't help but shudder. Zephyr looked at Karen laughing and crying for a while, with a dark look on his face. What? You look down on me and think that this old man like me is no match for you. Zephyr deliberately added the accent to the old man, apparently still remembering the last time Karen asked him repeatedly. I'm not, I don't have it, don't talk nonsense, it's just that if I use this ability, you. Thinking of Smoker's actions just now, Zephyr finally understood what Karen meant. Oh, I was underestimated. Just do it, no matter what embarrassing thing happens, it won't be a problem. Zephyr smiled confidently and said, if I can't beat you, why would first be a Marine General? The advantage is mine. Chapter 21 Golden Bell, Iron Shirt. Advertisement. Looking at Zephyr, who was full of confidence, Karen shook his head helplessly. Now he has been put on the stove and there is no way out. All right. Karen reluctantly agreed. Zephyr nodded with satisfaction and shouted to the recruits. Look, what is domineering? Okay, do you want to keep some distance? After speaking, Zephyr took the initiative to step back nearly 50 meters and made a gesture of invitation to Karen. Karen had no choice but to take a deep breath, not predicting what would happen next. Thinking of Zephyr's appearance, he raised the yuan hung in his hand high and shouted. Look at the sword. The one sword immortal kneels down. On the other side, Zephyr quickly closed his eyes when he saw Karen unsheathing the sword in his hand. He was there both times when Karen took action, so he knew that Karen would shout, look at the sword, every time before he made a move. So he already had an idea in his mind, which was to close his eyes and not look. This should be the opportunity for the devil fruit to activate. Close your eyes and carefully feel the movement next to you. Sure enough, he neither moved nor his posture, etc. Zephyr opened his eyes, and a bitter face appeared in front of him. It was not Karen or someone else. When? I clearly didn't look at the sword in his hand. I didn't feel myself moving. Could it be that it is not moving, but appearing instantly? The whole place was silent, and all the recruits' mouths were open enough to put down an ostrich egg. What did they see? I was originally looking forward to Zephyr's fight against Karen, but it wasn't like Zhang Fei eating bean sprouts. It was a piece of cake. I never expected that this jaw-dropping scene would happen. From their perspective, when Karen raised his sword and said, look at the sword, Zephyr on the opposite side quickly closed his eyes, and before he could even sigh, Zephyr had a lot of fighting experience. I saw Zephyr, suddenly, appear next to Karen, kneeling on one knee, raising his hands high to clamp the edge of Karen's sword. The picture was quite funny, but no one wanted to laugh, and they didn't even know what kind of expression they should make. How is it possible? Teacher Zephyr also lost. Is it really impossible to defeat devil fruit? This is what all soldiers are thinking. Advertisement. Karen looked at Zephyr holding the sword with a complicated expression. His mood was equally complicated. Although he had predicted that this scene would happen, he was also in disbelief when it actually happened. It is worthy of being produced by the system and must be a high-quality product. There is no doubt that it is very powerful to be caught with bare hands. Even Zephyr, who is a general, cannot resist it. But his shortcoming is also obvious, that is, while controlling the other party, he has also controlled himself. In contrast, although Zephyr was a little surprised, he was not discouraged because he did not use domineering energy in order to verify his guess. Seeing that closing his eyes was no longer possible, he no longer hesitated. The armed body suddenly emerged from his hands and spread all over his body. He tried his best to break free, but found that no matter how much strength he used, he couldn't move it at all. Why? Can't hockey fight devil fruits? Zephyr felt a rare panic in his heart. Hockey can certainly fight against devil fruits. But is it the ability of the devil fruit to be 100% caught with bare hands? The answer is of course no. On the surface, it is a devil fruit ability called word fruit. True ability is the power of rules that overrides all. Since it was disguised, Karen naturally didn't want Zephyr to see it, at least not in such public view. So, Karen quietly removed his left hand from the hilt of the sword. Boom. Click. As soon as the power of rules exerted on Yuan Hong was transferred, Karen felt a terrifying strange force coming from underneath him. Karen flew up like a kite with its string cut off, his body spinning uncontrollably in the air several times. Smashed down hard. Let me go, this Lao Deng is so strong. Golden bell, iron shirt. In desperation, Karen quickly protected her head with both hands, rolled herself into a ball, and activated her unique skills. He rolled on the ground several times before gradually stopping to unload. Ahem. Karen spit out a mouthful of blood and climbed up from the ground with difficulty. He was dizzy and his eyes were filled with stars. Just as he was about to fall, a soft body supported him. He looked up, but he couldn't see his face clearly. In order to prevent himself from falling, he subconsciously grabbed up. So big. So soft. What's this? Used it and pinched it. Advertisement, pung. His body was thrown to the ground, his eyes blackened, and he fainted completely. Doctor, doctor. The familiar voice resounded throughout the world, and the first person to react was Zephyr. Things happened so fast, he didn't expect that the long sword that he couldn't break free from just now would suddenly become so fragile. Trying his best to break free, he couldn't stop in time. Soon a group of doctors in white coats came over carrying a stretcher. They first performed a simple examination on Karen with instruments, nodded to Zephyr, then helped Karen onto the stretcher and carried him away. Zephy's anxious heart slowly relaxed, and he knew that Karen was fine. Is this domineering? Wow, Teacher Zephyr is so awesome. I'm just telling you, how could Teacher Zephyr lose? As Karen was carried away, the soldiers came to their senses one after another and looked at Zephyr with burning eyes. His eyes were full of admiration and respect for Zephyr. Ahem, you see, this is domineering. As long as you train your physical fitness well, you can learn it in the future. Zephyr gave the recruit a shot of chicken blood at the right time, making the soldiers eager to run hundreds more laps and do a few more hours of physical training. Recalling the scene where he suddenly woke up just now, Zephyr showed an unknown smile on his lips and murmured in a voice that only he could hear. Smelly boy. What? Smoker, who was standing next to Zephyr, raised his head and said blankly. Zephy's thoughts were interrupted. He looked at the innocent-looking Smoker and said angrily. I told you to practice for a few more hours before going back, and you are not allowed to eat before 12 o'clock. Clear. Smoker gave a military salute and shouted loudly. Zephy's head was covered with black lines. He turned his attention to Tina, who was training beside him, and showed a smile. Tina, go to the medical room and take care of Karen. Tina, who was training, left the training equipment in her hands. When she heard this, her cheeks turned red and she stammered. Why did you let Tina go? Before Zephyr could answer, Rosinante, who was also training on the side, dropped his training equipment and raised his hand to indicate. Me, let me go, oh, it hurts me to death. As soon as she finished speaking, Tina's palm gently patted Rosinante's shoulder, showing a kind smile. Zephy's face turned dark and he said angrily, where are you going? It hurts even if a girl slaps you. It's embarrassing. You're just like Smoker. You are not allowed to eat until 12 o'clock after practice. Ignoring Rosinante's wailing, he looked at Tina walking faster and faster, with a slight curl in the corner of his mouth. It's such a youthful time, Brad, I'll help you just once. Chapter 22. The man is as good as the sword advertisement. Opening his eyes again, Karen looked at the familiar ceiling with a wry smile on his lips. Just as he was about to stand up, he heard a concerned voice coming from his ear. Are you awake? How do you feel? Only then did Karen realize that there was a girl with pink hair sitting next to her bed. She was looking at him with concerned eyes. It's Tina. Why is she here? Thinking of the softness before coma, could it be her? After coughing slightly, Karen smiled awkwardly. Ahem, haha, I'm fine. As he spoke, Karen sat up from the hospital bed and did a few stretching movements at will. Although he could move, his movements were more or less trembling, which looked a bit funny. Peeved. Tina laughed out loud. Haha. Karen also laughed. Relatively silent, the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Except for the last brief exchange on the school field, this is the first time Karen has been so close to Tina. I have to say that Tina has a good figure. She is tall and has a thin waist. Well, it is very big. The refreshing fragrance keeps teasing Karen's nose, making him a little distracted and thinking. After being stunned for a full minute, Tina seemed to have discovered something and quickly distanced herself a few steps away from Karen. Karen touched her nose awkwardly and laughed. You. That. They both spoke at the same time and stopped at the same time. Karen quickly made a gesture of invitation to Tina, indicating that Tina would speak first. Tina stood up, took out a sword from the bedside, made a choking sound, a cold light flashed, and drew the sword out of its sheath. Karen was startled and stammered. No, no. No, I admit that I took a peek, but you can't do this to me, I swear it's just one glance. Tina looked at Karen blankly, not quite understanding what Karen meant. Slowly, a blush crept towards Tina's lovely cheeks. It seemed that she was infected by Karen, and she also stuttered a little when she spoke. It doesn't matter, no, your sword is broken. Before I could think carefully about what it meant, I saw Tina handing over half of the yuan hong in her hand. Karen looked at the half-cut yuan hong with mixed feelings in his heart. He didn't expect that the long sword he named yuan hong would end up like the yuan hong he knew well. Can't the sword be called yuan hong? Are you okay? Seeing Karen staring at Kan Jian, Tina couldn't help but ask. Advertisement. She understood the importance of a sword to a swordsman, especially the first one in life, and was afraid that Karen would not be able to withstand the blow. But is Karen a swordsman? It's okay, I'm just feeling a little emotional. Karen came to his senses and reinserted half of the yuan hong into the scabbard. It is said that some swordsmen regard their swords as important as their lives. Tina bit her lip and said a little worriedly, I'm not, and I've only had this sword for 3 days, so I can't say I have any feelings for it. Karen smiled at Tina and then whispered, is there any smoke? Tina did bring a cigarette, but she did not hand it to Karen and asked. You don't smoke, don't you? I want to smoke, Karen said. Tina still didn't give the cigarette to Karen, and Karen gave Tina a questioning look. This is the medical room. If you want to smoke, please see if you can get up. Tina explained. Karen nodded and moved the quilt covering his body. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he heard a loud voice coming from the door. Is that little guy Karen awake? The voice was loud and powerful, and Karen was very familiar with it. Tina quickly stood up, looked at Zephyr, and said respectfully. Teacher Zephyr, Karen is fine, he said and pointed to Karen who was lying on the hospital bed again. Water, water, water. Karen blinked at Tina and murmured unconsciously. Tina froze on the spot, her eyes full of confusion and confusion. Zephyr walked very quickly and soon arrived at the hospital bed, frowning slightly. Didn't you say it's okay? As he spoke, he poured a glass of water from the table and put it to Karen's mouth. Tina opened her mouth, but said nothing. Karen drank the water in the cup in one gulp and looked at Zephy's concerned eyes, feeling a warm current in his heart. Drink slowly. Zephyr helped Karen up from the bed, with a trace of guilt in his eyes. He has trained countless Marines in his life, but never once did he send his students to the hospital like Karen. Teacher Zephyr, you're here, I'm fine. Karen sat up with difficulty and said weakly. Advertisement, is this okay? Where's the doctor? Let him come and check. The guilt in Zephy's eyes became more intense, and he was about to get up and look for the doctor. Karen quickly stopped him and joked about how the next scene would play out if the doctor came over. It's okay, cough, it's okay. The doctor came just now and said there's nothing wrong. As he spoke, Karen glanced at Tina. Tina was unmoved and just looked at Karen, neither revealing nor cooperating. Zephyr felt Karen's grip, sat on the bench again, and looked at Karen suspiciously. Is it really okay? It's okay, Karen said, weakly. Oh, if it's okay, I'll leave then. This is the fruit I brought for you. Zephyr put the fruit basket in his hand on the bedside and was about to leave. How could Karen let Zephyr leave like this? He quickly stopped him and asked anxiously. Where is my sword? Zephy's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind as clear as a mirror. Good boy. You are waiting for me here. What sword? I'll leave if nothing happens. Zephyr pretended to be dumbfounded and said. Old fox. Seeing that Zephyr was not cooperating, Karen looked at Tina. Tina was still unmoved and looked at the master and apprentice with interest. There was no other way, so Karen had to strengthen her body and pull out the long sword on the bedside. With a cry, Karen seemed to be possessed by Oscar. She looked at Yuan Hong with dull eyes, and 2 lines of tears fell from the corners of her mouth. My sword, my sword. At this moment, Karen was distraught and hugged Yuan Hong tightly to her chest, as desperate as if her wife had died. Zephy's mouth twitched slightly and he said blankly. Didn't this sword just come into your hands 2 days ago? Karen came back to his senses, put Yuan Hong in front of him, wiped his tears, and said righteously. Although I have only owned it for 3 days, in my heart, it is as important as my life. Peeved. Tina couldn't hold back and laughed out loud. Karen turned his eyes to Tina, his eyes full of doubts, as if he didn't understand what was so funny about this sentence. Tina waved her hands and said with a smile, It's okay, I just remembered something funny, you continue. Karen turned his gaze to Zephy's eyes again, no longer as weak as before, and said righteously. People are in the tower. Ahem. People are in the tower, and the sword is there. The sword destroys people and kills them. Teacher Zephyr, you don't want to lose such an outstanding student, right? Chapter 23 Return of Life Advertisement. The whole place was silent, and Zephyr looked at Karen with a look that looked like a fool. Pointing at Karen, he asked Tina in a deep voice, who was watching the show. Has he always been this crazy? Tina recalled the first time she met Karen, who confessed her love in front of so many people, so she nodded without hesitation. Zephyr reluctantly pulled out a cigar from his arms and wanted to light it, but Karen snatched it away. What kind of show is this? Zephyr said angrily. This is the medical room, no smoking allowed. Tina pointed to the no smoking sign and smiled. The atmosphere fell into a strange state again. With big eyes and small eyes, Zephyr looked at Karen, who was holding Yuan Hong in one hand and holding him tightly with the other. He couldn't help but asked. What do you want? Karen put Yuan Hong aside and said in a deep voice. I heard that there are many weapons in the world made by famous swordsmiths, and they are called famous swords. Unexpectedly, Karen finally revealed his purpose. You want a famous sword? Zephyr frowned slightly. Of course he was very familiar with famous swords. After all, he had taught so many students, and a large proportion of them used weapons. That's right. Karen nodded. In his previous life, in addition to being interested in the abilities of devil fruits, he also liked the famous swords inside. Of course, the same goes for beauties. Zephyr thought for a moment. He valued Karen very much. Not only him, but Sengoku and Garp also valued Karen very much. So thinking about it, giving Karen a famous sword was nothing. So he nodded. Okay, I will ask someone to help you find a suitable sharp knife. Karen rolled her eyes and complained in her heart. This is too stingy, spending so much energy on acting, only to be given a sharp knife. You must know that Zoro, a pirate, has a sharp sword with 21 skills when he appears on the scene. Even in Rog Town, he was given a good sharp sword with 50 skills. Just a sharp knife. Karen shook his head and said in a deep voice. Yuan Hong is my dearest relative and friend, hard. The fist is hard. Zephy's face turned dark as he heard what Karen meant. Advertisement greedy little devil, you must know that Marine is not like a pirate. Although there are indeed many famous swords in Marine, there are also many Marines. With more wolves and less meat, Marine does not have much leftover food in his hands. But thinking of Karen's importance, Zephyr gritted his teeth and said gloomily. I'll find you a good, sharp knife. Hearing this, Karen nodded with satisfaction, wiped away non-existent tears, and said with a smile. Thank you, Teacher Zephyr. You can let go now. Zephyr looked at the hand that was holding him tightly and said angrily. Karen quickly let go of his hand, sat up, and said with a smile. Haha, look at me, I'm so excited to see you here. Snort. Zephyr stood up, turned and left without even looking at Karen. Tina looked at Karen who stood up from the bed and said coldly. The acting is good. Karen touched her nose, smiled, and said, Haha, you don't understand, this is how a crying child can be fed. There are many things that if you don't want them, others will never give them to you. Yeah? Karen's smile froze because it was not Tina who spoke, but Zephyr who had left and returned. Zephyr had a sullen face, clenched his fists, and slowly walked towards Karen. Teacher Zephyr, what do you want to do? Karen said nervously as her heart was racing. Zephyr didn't say a word, showed a cruel smile to Karen, stretched out his hand. Karen quickly stepped back and covered her face. What are you doing? Zephyr picked up the fruit basket he had given him from the bedside table with a smile on his face. Ah, ahem, it's nothing, my face is a little itchy. Karen breathed a sigh of relief, scratched his cheek, moved his eyes slightly, and said with a flattering smile. I'll see you off. No, I think you can stand up, so you can definitely come to training tomorrow. Zephyr took out an apple from the fruit basket and handed it to Karen, smiling maliciously. Karen's smile froze, but Zephyr ignored Karen, handed the fruit basket in his hand to Tina, and left with a smile. It looks like you're not going to have a good time tomorrow. Tina put the fruit basket back on the bedside and interjected. Advertisement. Karen took a bite of the apple fiercely. The apple was very sweet, but his heart was very bitter. Tina left not long after Zephyr left, and the ward was empty except for Karen. He was not in a hurry to leave this time and put Yuan Hong on the bedside again. Looking at the fruit basket sent by Zephyr, it was already empty. He had stuffed all the fruits into his stomach. Close your eyes and try to use life return to absorb the energy in your stomach. Maybe it was due to his battle with Zephyr. Slowly, a slight warmth spreads throughout the body, making up for the body's deficiencies. Although it was only for a moment, Karen still felt it. The return of life was successful. Karen opened his eyes instantly. Sure enough, fighting is the best teacher. With a thought, he opened the system interface in his mind. Target reputation. 6,530 10,000ths. Recruiting elite with great reputation. Skills acquired. Unparalleled skill. Effect 1. Forcibly upgrade a skill you have mastered to the highest level. No skill is selected. Effect 2. The more confident you are in calling out the moves, the stronger the effect. 100% chance of being caught with bare hands. Use sword weapons with both hands. Look at a person, shout, look at the sword, and 100% chance of being caught by the opponent. Use unparalleled skills to enhance the return of life. Without hesitation, he immediately raised the life return to the highest level. As soon as he was promoted, Karen immediately felt a burst of hunger in his stomach. This was the return of life reminding him to replenish energy. No wonder, in his previous life, Luffy always cried out that he was hungry after fighting. Now he felt the same way. Fortunately, his injuries were not serious, and the hunger caused by his stomach was bearable. The energy brought by fruits is absorbed very quickly and is replenished into the body in just an instant. Without any further hesitation, Karen carried Yuan Hong, who was placed on the bedside, behind her back, and quickly ran towards the cafeteria. It is now around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and most people are still training, so there are not many people in the cafeteria. Marine Canteen has two models, one is ordinary meals that you can eat for free and unlimited, and the other is special meals where you pay as much as you want. Karen didn't have much money. After the town was robbed by pirates, he only found more than 200,000 belly in the town. It seems like a lot, but in fact, it is only a little over 10,000 when compared to China's purchasing power. Fortunately, he spent most of his time at the Marine training camp and basically had no place to spend money. But now since it's not time for dinner, he had to come to the special window to order food. After ordering a few dishes, it actually cost 10,000 belly, which made Karen feel a little pain. Put an unknown fish food in your mouth. It's not that delicious, it's just the same as the food provided at ordinary windows. No wonder there are so few people eating here, the food is so expensive, and it has no characteristics. If it wasn't for dinner time, a fool would come here to eat. Chapter 24 Promotion Advertisement. As soon as the food enters the stomach, the return of life starts unconsciously, feeling the energy in the body to replenish the body's fatigue. Not only does it replenish energy, but also a feigned ability is integrated into his body. In other words, he can strengthen his body by eating a lot. Although this improvement is very, very small, it is also an unexpected surprise. Karen's eating movements couldn't help but speed up a bit. As most of the food was eliminated, the fatigue in his body disappeared and his strength increased slightly. If his physical fitness was originally 10, after eating this meal, his physical fitness is estimated to have reached 10.01. I ate some more, but I couldn't eat any more. What's going on? He did order a lot of food, but it was far from Luffy's exaggerated level. After pondering for a moment, he understood the reason. Luffy could eat so much not only because he had the master ability of returning life, but also because he was a rubberman, sun god. So he could eat as much as he wanted. Karen, on the other hand, is just an ordinary person. So he can't do what Luffy does, because his physical fitness is not that strong. Maybe, when he's strong enough, he can do sit-ups like Luffy. After eating, Karen went directly to the training school without hesitation. He wanted to test the usefulness of life return. After a series of tests, he was pleasantly surprised to find that the benefits of life return are not only the rapid recovery of energy. It is much more powerful, and his muscle control has been greatly enhanced. For example, when he wants to punch, he can transfer his body's excess strength to his arms, making his punches faster and more powerful. In the same way, when he needs to move, he transfers the excess strength to his legs. Under the influence of life return, his body's coordination, control, and mastery have reached an astonishing improvement. I feel like a fighting master. I'm afraid any power-generating technique can't improve me as much as returning life. Karen then tested the degree of improvement in strength, reaction, speed, etc. Well, now I should have the ability to fight Smoker even without the help of 100% bare-handed swordsmanship. Once I fully adapt, I will definitely be stronger than Smoker. This is not the most important thing. I remember that the day after tomorrow is the second week of the elite training camp, which means that I will soon learn the 6 marine poses. With my current control over the body, I have a certain mastery of the marine 6 poses. It will become very simple. Karen stopped what he was doing and nodded thoughtfully. Advertisement. In his original thought, getting his life back would only make him less tired after each training session and allow him to continue training more quickly. But now that he has mastered the return of life, he has discovered that the return of life can truly improve himself, which makes him absolutely confident that he made the right choice. Is this the terrifying ability of a master to return life? But the return of life also has an obvious shortcoming, that is, he gets hungry more easily than before, for example, now. Returning to the canteen again, it is now around 11 o'clock in the evening. There are still not many people in the canteen, but fortunately the ordinary window is still open. He doesn't want to eat at those special windows that have no other advantages besides high prices. There are no aunts with trembling hands like those in the previous life in this place. After all, this is a military camp and they will never be harsh on the food. Karen simply served 3 times as much food as before, turned into a glutton and began to enjoy it. It's still a delicious meal that doesn't cost any money. Karen touched her bulging belly and burped with satisfaction. After a while, his belly returned to its original state at a speed visible to the naked eye. Something is wrong, Karen frowned. Although these foods can replenish energy, they cannot absorb energy into the body. Is it because of the difference in food? Karen was thoughtful, slowly stood up and walked towards a canteen manager nearby. Hello, I would like to ask, what is the difference between the paid window and the free window? It's just that the ingredients used are different. The ingredients in the free window are all ordinary ingredients, while the ingredients in the paid window are taken from the Poseidon category. After receiving a satisfactory answer, Karen thanked him and relaxed his brows. I see. It seems that only eating Poseidon will improve my physique. Let's not talk about whether I have the ability to kill Poseidon. From my current position, I can't come into contact with Poseidon at all. The only place where you can get in touch with Poseidons is through a special window, but the problem is that I have no money. I can't make money in the military camp either. Karen rubbed her temples in distress, as she really didn't have a good solution to this matter. After leaving the cafeteria, Karen did not go to the school field for training. It was already getting late. Since he came to this world, what he has been thinking about every day is training to strengthen himself. Now that my life has been returned, the tight string in my heart has relaxed. Now he just wants to have a good night's rest. Ding ding ding. Advertisement. Just half an hour after lying down, a doorbell woke Karen up. He opened his eyes blankly. Because he entered the elite training camp, he was assigned to a separate dormitory. So he had no roommates at all, and this was the first time he heard his doorbell ring. Who could it be? Karen sat up from the bed and opened the door. To his surprise, the person who came was Smoker. Why are you here? Karen turned and looked at the clock. It was now 1 o'clock. I owe you something. Smoker explained, rubbing the back of his head. Karen glanced at him, a little confused, and moved out of the way to let Smoker come in. Have you just finished training? Karen frowned slightly when he smelled the smell of sweat coming from Smoker's body. Yes, Teacher Zephyr asked me to train until 12 o'clock, so I trained a little longer. Smoker took out a cigar from his shirt and said casually, Want to smoke? No. Karen shook his head. Smoker nodded, lit the cigar, blew out a puff of white smoke, and explained. Didn't I lose to you this morning? I'm willing to admit defeat. What do you want me to do? Karen was expressionless and said in a deep voice. I remember I said that there is no bet on who wins or who loses. That's for you. Smoker looked at Karen deeply and said firmly, For me, if I initiate a challenge and lose, there will be a punishment. Karen smiled. He didn't expect Smoker to be so stubborn. He looked at Smoker seriously and said in a deep voice. Are you sure? Smoker took a deep breath of smoke and nodded firmly. I'm sure. No regrets. My requirements are very high. Karen's eyes gradually turned cold, and he showed a sly smile to Smoker. His white teeth were frightening in the moonlight. Smoker was startled by Karen. Beads of sweat fell from his forehead. He swallowed unconsciously, and stood up a little straighter. No. No regrets. Hey. Then. Karen laughed strangely and said solemnly, Please treat me to a meal. Smoker was startled, wiped the sweat from his face, and said in disbelief. That's it? Well, I have a big appetite. Karen showed an embarrassed smile. Smoker's body relaxed a lot. How much money can he spend on just one meal? So he said confidently. It's okay, feel free to eat. Chapter 25. Like training. Advertisement. After sending Smoker away, Karen returned to bed and fell into a deep sleep. Until a rapid sound of the alarm clock woke him up. He had a dream, dreaming that he returned to the day when he first came to this world, and dreamed of the day when the town of Sreely was destroyed. His ears were filled with howls and screams, but this time he did not hide, but stood in front of the pirate named Scott. The difference from last time was that this time it was him who was standing and the one who was lying down was the pirate. I believe it won't be too late until that day, and I'm looking forward to it. Karen muttered to herself in the mirror. You are in a good mood today. Rosinante walked up to Karen and smiled. Really, maybe the weather is very good today. Karen didn't explain that much and pointed to the gray sky. Well, this is really good. At least it won't be very hot today. Rosinante patted his forehead. Anyone who has cheated a famous sword will be in a good mood. Tina stretched her body, stretched her better body, and said nonchalantly. What famous sword? Smoker came to Karen for some reason and asked inexplicably. Rosinante also looked at Tina curiously. Tina didn't seem to hear anything, but turned to look at Smoker, wondering. I remember you weren't here a few days ago. Smoker nuzzled Karen and said gloomily. I want to treat him to dinner. Apparently Karen teased him intentionally last night to make him feel very unhappy. Rosinante looked at Smoker for a while, then at Tina, and finally focused on Karen, opening her mouth without speaking. All of you, stand at attention. Zephy's voice was like a thunder, and he said in a deep voice. Advertisement. Today is still physical training. The difference from the past is that this time I will test your stance. If your stance is not standard, the training will be doubled. Speaking of the word, double, Zephyr also glanced at Karen specifically, intending to tell Karen that he wanted revenge. This was his deliberate choice. Although the stance is simple, it is also the most error-prone. Unlike other events, standing posture is not just as simple as standing still. It requires the cooperation of the whole body. There are problems in the head, eyes, shoulders, arms, legs, and even the entire body. He had to let Karen know that it wasn't that simple to get his things. Unexpectedly, Karen didn't even look at him, and Zephyr laughed angrily in his heart. Good boy, you will suffer later. Zephyr walked slowly towards Karen, inspecting it carefully with a scrutinizing gaze. Well, yes, it's very standard, but it doesn't matter. This is just the beginning. You can't keep it forever. With Zephyr thinking like this, he actually stood beside Karen and didn't move, just staring at him. Karen is not panicking at all now. You must know that after learning how to return life, with his control over his body, it will not be a problem even if he can maintain it for a day. So, the two of us just stared at each other, you staring at me, and I looked ahead. The first person who couldn't hold on was neither Karen nor Zephyr, but the recruits beside Karen. They were sweating like rain and their bodies were crumbling. One by one, they prayed in their hearts that Zephyr would leave quickly and stick to other places so that they could be lazy for a while. But their worries were unnecessary, because when one of them finally couldn't hold on any longer and swayed, Zephyr ignored them at all. At this time Zephyr only had Karen in his eyes. As time goes by, more and more recruits can no longer hold on. But Karen remained motionless, not even a drop of sweat left. When did this kid get such good physical fitness? Zephyr was full of doubts. He moved his body and looked around, only to find that most of the students were already swaying around and sweating like rain. He frowned slightly and didn't say much. He understood that this was not the recruit's problem. Advertisement immediately, his eyes rolled and he showed a smile like an old fox. Facts have proved that when your leader intends to punish you, he will always have an excuse even if you have not made any mistakes. While Karen was still lamenting that life was returning to strength, Zephyr spoke. Karen, your breathing is too messy. Your physical training will be doubled in a moment. Karen was speechless, looking at Zephyr like a child in amusement. He really didn't expect Zephyr to be so shameless. Teacher Zephyr, so many people are not up to par. Why are you punishing only Karen? What Karen didn't expect was that before he said anything, Smoker standing aside felt sorry for Karen. Who is not standard? I think they are quite standard, Zephyr asked with an expression as if I didn't see anything. Me? Smoker raised his head, looked around, and said solemnly, I'm not standard. You? Humph, very good, then you can train twice as much as Karen. Zephyr looked at Smoker with admiration, rolled his eyes, and said in a deep voice. Smoker and Karen train twice as much, and everyone else trains as normal. After taking a few steps, Zephyr turned back and smiled at Karen. After training, come to my office. I found the famous sword. Then Zephyr left without looking back. What famous sword? Rosinante finally couldn't hold it back and asked Tina next to her. So Tina told how Karen blackmailed Zephyr yesterday. I see, let me tell you, why is teacher Zephyr targeting Karen so much today? Rosinante suddenly realized, and said with a smile. If you give me a famous sword, I will train twice as much. Smoker's gloomy face could squeeze out water. He never thought that Zephyr had a reward for Karen. He looked at Karen with a resentful look, but it was not his fault. After all, he asked for it himself. However, if Karen can get a famous sword by doubling his training, what can Smoker get? Looking at Smoker who was also training twice as hard, Rosinante asked curiously. Smoker's face froze and he said fiercely. I like training, don't you?